Come through, coming to the end of 5 weeks of campaigning here in the UK general election, but in the US it's a much longer time, isn't it?
No, absolutely, but I think you have to give it to them that in terms of the uncertainty they are facing as much as financial investors are facing, if you look at the data points that we see right now, that is the right assessment. Now, if they tried to make an assessment on what will happen on the 15th of December, which is obviously an expectation for some more news on the trade dispute, that wouldn't be a proper assessment. They can't. So in that respect, I think it is the right way of kind of keeping a stable outlook for the time being, and they will have to reassess when we get new data.
So if we sort of put the December the 15th on one side, because in a sense, as you say, it's unknowable, but we look at the other recession indicators. I mean, where in the cycle do you see the US? I mean, we constantly talk about late cycle. How late is this cycle going?
No, it clearly is, but obviously we have had a pretty interesting divergence in that the consumer actually has been pretty happy and supportive all along, and it's been the manufacturing sector, which is the smaller part of the economy, that has been obviously incredibly weak, has been impacted by global trade receding, has been impacted by the dispute between the US and China. And as such, the stabilization in the manufacturing, the catalyst potentially could come from manufacturing, because to see the consumer accelerating is quite difficult. The consumer has been the backbone all along. So that's the interesting kind of dilemma we are facing. And as such, obviously, it is so important to watch politics, because as we know, a company is not making huge investments unless they know there's a certain outlook.
Okay, the trade war, though, as you say, hangs over all. Trade teams in the US and China saying that they're in close touch. That's according to Gao Feng, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokesman. This does sort of linger, and again, markets are pivoting on the decision of one tranche of tariffs on Sunday, and today we are Thursday.
Yes, and I think we have to be realistic as well. I don't think we will get a fully fledged solution in the short term. There might be ceasefires, we might get a bit more information, but I think it is unlikely that there will be a full resolution ahead of the presidential election in the US.
All right, Sonia, thanks very much for the moment. Stay with us. Sonia Allard, CIO at Legal and General Investment Management, talking about the risks of the trade war and the recession possibilities.
Indeed, and the Fed, of course. This ahead of the ECB decision and the SNB rate decisions today. We're going to talk about Europe next and what 2020 holds for investors. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills, the kind of skills that companies need to build real products, and the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rigged.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Ah, Christmas. A time for sharing gifts and laughter. And photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This week at Tesco, whole beef roasting joints and whole legs of lamb are half price. That's a whole lot of halves off a whole lot of wholes. What a mouthful. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Max 2 per customer, selected stores, excludes Express, ends 31st of December.
This is the Tune In Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Federal Aviation Administration predicted more than a dozen fatal crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX after that first crash a year ago, which was a Lion Air jet that went down, killing all 189 people on board. An FAA document released during a House hearing this morning noted the prediction before the second crash happened last March in Ethiopia, killing 157. Investors are waiting for the Fed decision on the direction of interest rates. That comes at 2 Eastern today, and they're expected to hold rates steady. Investors also watching as Saudi Arabia's oil company Aramco has gained 10% in its debut of trading on the Saudi Stock Exchange. The company's value pushed above $1.8 trillion. That means it surpassed Apple as the largest listed company in the world.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European futures are pointing to a fairly flat open, similarly so for US futures. It follows a mixed trading day in Asia after the Fed signaled US interest rates will remain unchanged throughout 2020 thanks to solid US growth. Now, we've seen stocks in Hong Kong really the outperformance today, currently up 1 3/10%. Japanese shares closed fairly flat this this morning. Chinese shares were moving lower. They closed down 0.3%. If we take a look at bonds, we're really seeing 10-year Treasury yields holding around 1.8%, gaining actually a little bit, currently up a basis point after those Fed comments fueled bets on a high bar for any rate hike. Meanwhile, we're seeing 10-year bond yields follow suit, currently up a basis point but still at negative 31. Now, that Fed decision is really boosting EM currencies today. We've seen the Hong Kong dollar climb into the strong half of its trading band against a greenback. The Korean won also jumping the most in 5 weeks, up 0.7%. The yuan also slightly higher this morning. Investors, of course, looking ahead to Sunday's deadline for a U.S. tariff hike on Chinese imports. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is trading at a 5-week low. It did have its biggest drop since October yesterday. The pound, meanwhile, gaining again today against all its G10 peers. UK voters, of course, heading to the polls, and cable now well above 132. Gold standing pat at $1,474 a troy ounce. JP Morgan is saying that it's betting on lower bullion prices in 2020 amid a risk-on investment allocation. Finally, WTI crude just below $59 a barrel. Brent up 0.4% at $64 a barrel. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Today the UK goes to the polls. It's the nation's 4th election in a decade, and it's the second since the Brexit vote in 2016. It's also the first December vote in nearly a century. Polls close at 10 p.m. UK time tonight. Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting the new leaders of Germany's Social Democrats. That's happening later today. This comes a week after her junior coalition partners set out demands to remain in government. The SPD is demanding a series of concessions from the Merkel administration, including increased government spending for infrastructure and social welfare. And Botswana is making a second attempt to restart commercial hunts for its elephant population, the world's biggest. The government issued a quota for killing 272 in 2020, of which foreign hunters will be allowed to shoot 202 in export trophies. Most hunters in southern Africa come from the US. In Zimbabwe, the right to shoot costs at least $21,000. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, Christine Lagarde will make her debut press conference as ECB president this Thursday. It comes just a day after the new president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, revealed her goals to make the EU carbon neutral by 2050. I'm going to get into why I've combined those two stories together. But joining us this morning is Sonia Loud, CIO at Legal & General Investment Management. Just first, in terms of Christine Lagarde, it's going to be all about her speech, listening to the language that she uses, and just how much consistency she's going to provide as ECB head now that Mario Draghi is gone. What are you expecting?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is the real expectation of status quo and that we will continue on the path that has been laid out. And I think for Europe in particular, there's real expectation to discuss further whether fiscal stimulus can be the kind of the measure that fills the void, because there's real expectation whether we cut another 10 basis point might not really make a big difference. So what are we going to do in the context of a potentially slowing economy? There's multiple risks still on the horizon, and I think there probably is first search for words or hints how she thinks about this. I think there's real expectation as well, given that she has been a politician, that she might be able to really bridge that gap, and that she will reach out to politicians, that she can probably start thinking and form a consensus around fiscal easing. And very interesting, given that you mentioned Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde has picked up climate change as a topic to put on the agenda for the ECB, and so you could see how potentially fiscal measures could be set up with a purpose, i.e. around the climate change and the carbon neutral targets that Ursula von der Leyen has set out.
Well, I want to dig into the climate change thing in a moment, but just in terms of what she might say in terms of the review, perhaps the more conventional view of what the ECB might do. One of the things that certainly seems to be on the table is, in a way, what some people might consider moving the goalposts, because reviewing whether the measure of inflation, the way inflation is put as a target, whether all that actually works and is useful. I mean, what do you think?
Clearly, I do not expect her to say anything other than she will review it, because she will need a lot more information, and she will need to spend quite a lot of time in really assessing the effectiveness and really start finding the causalities between monetary policy and the the actual economic impact and the inflationary output. And as such, I think that probably she will set the scene that this is going to happen, but I assume that this will take a lot longer. And hence, obviously, in the meantime, yes, QE will continue, and I think there's no expectation that she will touch on this, which will provide the stability and the framework for markets to function properly. And I think as time progresses, we will learn more on what her findings are.
Okay, what do you make then of this idea of Europe being a kind of green champion possibly in the world? The Eurozone is potentially going to struggle even to make 1% growth next year. Do you think the answer is Ursula von der Leyen's goals of carbon neutrality? I mean, a lot of people saying it's going to take a massive amount of spending, 1970s style spending even, and that it's incredibly ambitious.
I think we should stop trying to, see the climate ambition as an impediment on growth. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I think we have to be very realistic that not doing anything on climate change will potentially have a much bigger economic impact further down the line. So to say we have to hold back with doing what is necessary, I think is wrong. And I actually believe there's a positive link in the investment side of what needs to happen, which might potentially have even a positive impact.
Yeah, no, I don't mean so much that. But I more the fact that it will take at least to get us to the point where companies pick up on this, it's going to take a lot of state intervention. I think that is the debate.
I think we have to, not necessarily pure state intervention. I think to me it's the collaboration between obviously policymakers, central banks, asset managers. There is a role to play in the context of capital allocation to make sure that we have a common goal of what we would like to achieve. And that if we were to get there, and I think there's the high hope given her background, given her remit, that she might be a quite an important figure in bringing this all together. And I think that's actually incredibly exciting, potentially.
But also extremely difficult, because there are many, within Europe, there are many views on this. And whether it's state involvement or whether it's trying to encourage the markets to move in that direction. I mean, Poland subsists largely on burning coal, for example. So the issues are very strong. I mean, do you see Christine Lagarde and Ursula von der Leyen working hand in glove on this? Is that potentially possible?
I would hope so, because that obviously would be a key collaborative engagement between those two that would really set the tone, and is something that we haven't seen in the past. So, and let's face it, the reflection on Europe and the divergence is obviously what we see globally. There is no unanimous view on what needs to happen, and it's very clear that we have to face the challenge that economic growth and obviously energy demand in the context of climate change is not an easy one to square. But having obviously two of our top leaders in Europe united on this would be a huge step forward and actually hugely encouraging.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about something else then. Asset allocation away from green, or perhaps including green investments. Give us some of your top tips in terms of exposure for 2020. We've discussed late cycle, we've discussed the difficulties of growth here in Europe.
So right now our stance is more neutral on risk, and we would not necessarily start looking to add to risk right now, simply because you have so much political uncertainty. We have equity markets delivering around 20% on average around the world.
Yeah.
So, the risk for a major wobble because of, trying to assess political risk is quite real. And so, given the potential negative implication for economic growth on top of this, we would actually say, yes, you have to stay engaged, but we would not add at this point, and it's probably worth waiting for greater clarity around some of the major political events that we're facing.
But where to go then? Because bonds negative in large areas, gold perhaps, the yen. I mean, where are we actually looking?
We still have a preference for equities, simply because of the facts you've just mentioned, but we are definitely a lot more selective, because we should not forget that some of the major beneficiaries in the equities market have been related to ever lower bond yields. So understanding that bond yields, even though we are not forecasting a major rise, might have much more volatility, kind of points to some potential difference in equity market performance. UK equities are cheap, we know it. So on the back of what might happen today, we might see some opportunities there. Then we will see some Japanese equities we believe are quite interesting. And actually, again, coming back to our discussion around the trade dispute, obviously all manufacturing related, and obviously Germany in that context might look attractive. But again, you have, as an investor, identify what you think is attractive, but we need greater clarity on some of these major political events.
Okay, Sonia Loud, thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg Radio and Television this morning, CIO at Legal and General Investment Management.
And coming up in the next hour of Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be speaking to Lena Komileva, Chief Economist at G+ Economics. We'll also, of course, be talking trade war and the ECB with her. This is Bloomberg.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10 gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Federal Aviation Administration predicted more than a dozen fatal crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX after that first crash a year ago, which was a Lion Air jet that went down, killing all 189 people on board. An FAA document released during a House hearing this morning noted the prediction before the second crash happened last March in Ethiopia, killing 157. Investors are waiting for the Fed decision on the direction of interest rates. That comes at 2 Eastern today, and they're expected to hold rates steady. Investors also watching as Saudi Arabia's oil company Aramco has gained 10% in its debut of trading on the Saudi Stock Exchange. The company's value pushed above $1.8 trillion. That means it surpassed Apple as the largest listed company in the world.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Thursday, the 12th of December in London, coming up this hour.
The Fed holds rates and signals no change in 2020 in a solid economy. Asian stocks mixed after the US snapped a two-day retreat. Treasuries maintain gains.
Enter Lagarde. The ECB's first policy meeting under its new president would be dissected for any hints on restoring price stability.
Back to the polls. Britons begin voting in their third election in 4 years, and Israel is heading for its third ballot in less than 12 months. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And the Swiss National Bank is likely to stand pat while a rate cut is looming in Turkey.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio.
And one redhead to kick the morning off with. We've got a lot of central bank news this morning. Philippine Central Bank is saying pat. They're keeping their key rate at 4%.
Yeah, that was as expected. We also get the SNB in about 30 minutes' time. In terms of the rest of the markets this morning, it was all about the Federal Reserve signalling that US interest rates will remain unchanged there through 2020. that had some impact, not huge, but it did see Treasuries slip just a little bit, and we remain there this morning. In terms of US benchmark yields, 1.80%, so up a basis point for US yields. German and Italian bonds little changed this morning ahead of the ECB decision, Christine Lagarde's first press conference. Gilts awaiting the results of the UK general election underway here. As for the rest of the markets, I'll give you a check on where we start trading for the equities markets. US Stock 600, well, pretty much flat at the moment. FTSE 100 gains 0.1%. Xetra DAX is heading higher, up 0.1% this morning. So in terms of the rest of the markets, the FX space, Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index remains weak again after the Fed yesterday, and also possibly the dollar under pressure because of the trade story. Looking ahead to Sunday, we still don't know what the US is going to do in terms of those tariffs on Chinese imports. The British pound stronger 0.2% on cable. The euro trades at 1.1138, so also gaining 0.1%. As we see a jump for Brent crude up 0.3%, and Saudi Aramco powering through the $2 trillion valuation mark this morning when the Tadawul opened just an hour ago.
Okay, let's take a look at what the stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg stocks editor Sam Unstead has joined us here in our London studios. Sam, good morning to you. Now, ice cream news, always important. Nestle selling US ice cream to PAI Venture for $4 billion.
Well, so bear with me on this because they have kind of done that, but it's a bit more complicated. So basically they've sold their US ice cream business into a joint venture they already run with the private equity company PAI, which already has their European ice cream business. So what they've basically done is created a huge ice cream business, which probably is good for everyone. It seems to be taken relatively well. I mean, the market's in a bit of a holding pattern today, as you guys kind of already mentioned. The ECB is coming up later today. There's lots of other uncertainties in the air. Nestle shares are almost unchanged, but the main thing for them is that it will allow those ice cream brands to compete more against Unilever, which is their great rival in that space.
Yeah. Right. Well, staying with food, Ocado's fourth quarter retail sales up 10.8%, pretty much in line with guidance.
Yes, indeed, and this is this is one of the Europe doesn't have a huge number of hot stocks, and Ocado has been one of them in the last couple of years. They've been up another 50% or so this year. One of the best performing FTSE 100 stocks. Trading looks about in line. I think where analysts are focusing, and I can see Ocado shares are up 2.4% this morning, is there's been some good progress on their joint venture with M&S, which is just another line for them to keep building out their supermarket grocery business.
And staying in the same area, Metro AG has seen their profit falling, and they've been shedding their hypermarkets.
Yeah, that's right. And although profits falling at Metro, their shares are actually slightly higher today. Seems as though the Russian business, which is a real area of concern for Metro investors, margins there slightly improving over the course of the last quarter. They're only up ever so slightly this morning, but as I said, markets do appear to be in a bit of a holding pattern before all the various risk events get through the day.
Well, indeed, which are all underway, as we know. Sam, thanks very much. Sam Unstead there, Bloomberg stocks editor, bringing us up to speed with stocks to watch.
Yeah, let's take you to our top stories then this morning. Away from the elections, central bank decisions top the agenda this week. Last night, the FOMC kept interest rates on hold in the US, forecasting no changes through next year's presidential election. The chairman, Jerome Powell, saying that current policy will remain appropriate unless the outlook changes.
Looking ahead, we will be monitoring the effects of our recent policy actions along with other information bearing on the outlook as we assess the appropriate path of the target range for the federal funds rate. Of course, if developments emerge that cause a material reassessment of our outlook, we would respond accordingly. Policy is not on a preset course.
So markets appear to believe that we're on hold in terms of US rates. Also, Mr. Powell addressed the problems that have affected the repo market, which has concerned many this year. He told reporters that the committee might consider widening reserves management-related treasuries purchases to actually include short-term coupon-bearing securities if necessary in order to ease the liquidity strains in the money markets.
Delving deep into the plumbing of the financial system there. Well, now let's go over to Europe because Christine Lagarde is hosting her first policy meeting at the helm of the ECB today. Bloomberg's Piotr Skolimovsky has the preview from Frankfurt.
The Governing Council is forecast to keep policy unchanged, but Lagarde can expect an extensive questioning on her monetary policy views. The new president has said that the current stimulus must remain in place, but she may have to explain how concerned she is about the side effects of negative rates. Lagarde will also be quizzed about the scope of her planned policy review that is due to begin early next year, including how she expects the ECB to help help counter climate change. In Frankfurt, Piotr Skolimowski, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the Fed and the ECB have plenty of company in standing pat and keeping things steady as she goes. The Swiss National Bank will probably also hold and maintain its currency intervention threat. That decision comes in about 24 minutes' time, 8:30 a.m. London time. The Philippine Central Bank has also kept its interest rate unchanged for a second straight meeting just this morning, saving its ammunition as the economic growth picks up. Meanwhile, later today we also have Turkey, which is expected to break with the trend, though. Economists there calling for its central bank to cut its key rate by 150 basis points. That's despite soaring inflation.
And in top corporate news, Aramco surpassed the market value sought by Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, the Crown Prince. On its second day of trading, the oil giant again surged by the daily limit. That's pushed its value past $2 trillion. That was the valuation originally sought by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before the IPO. But investment bankers convinced him that was too ambitious.
Okay, so those are our top stories this morning and all that we're watching in the markets. But let's get the latest now in global news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Garrins. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Today, the UK goes to the polls. It's a nation's fourth election in a decade, and it's the second since the Brexit vote in 2016. It's also the first December vote in nearly a century. Polls close at 10 p.m. UK time. Israel is heading for its third election in less than a year. That's an astonishing development closely intertwined with Benjamin Netanyahu's legal troubles and might not resolve the political crisis. Bloomberg's Yaakov Ben-Elam reports.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, recently indicted in 3 corruption cases, will square off once more against chief rival, the centrist Benny Gantz, in early March. Both men resisted tremendous pressure to end the political crisis and uniting government, largely because Netanyahu rejects Gantz's demand that he step aside once summoned to court. Polls show another closely contested race in Tel Aviv. Kobe Ben-Melech, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Myanmar's leader has told the UN's highest court that allegations of genocide are incomplete and misleading. In 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to neighbouring Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke in The Hague, where she's begun a defence. The Nobel Peace Prize winner did acknowledge that disproportionate force may have been used at times by the military. And in France, labour unions have pledged to continue their fight against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms. This comes after the government revealed details of its proposals to overhaul the country's retirement system. Bloomberg's James Regan has more.
Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said on Wednesday that the government intends to introduce a new system from 2025, under which the age for full pension eligibility would be pushed back by 2 years to 64. A reform bill will be submitted to Parliament in February. Labour unions rejected the proposals and pledged to widen and intensify their protests. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Now let's get the latest sports news. Here's Colin Besley.
Manchester City will be one of the seeds in Monday's Champions League last 16 draw. The Group C winners maintained their unbeaten run in the competition with a 4-1 victory over Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. Tottenham go through as Group B runners-up, but fell to a 3-1 defeat to pace-setters Bayern Munich. Jose Mourinho made a number of changes, but is happy with his selection.
I hope that our supporters, they understand what I did. We all understand internally, we all agree that was the best option for the players like are playing every minute, and also the best option for the players that are not playing, and for the young players that need to develop.
There's plenty still up for grabs for the British sides heading into the final round of matches before the last 32 of the Europa League this evening. Manchester United have already progressed and will win Group L if they avoid defeat to Dutch side AZ Alkmaar. Group F leaders Arsenal need a point away to Standard Liège in Belgium to guarantee going through. Second place Wolves can clinch top spot in Group K, but need to win at home to Turkish side Besiktas and hope the other result goes their way. Celtic have already qualified as Group E winners ahead of their game with Cluj, while Group G leaders Rangers will be through with a draw at home to Young Boys of Switzerland. West Brom are level on points with Championship leaders Leeds this morning. They missed the chance to return to the summit with a 1-1 draw at strugglers Wigan. Brentford moved to within a point of the playoff spots with a 2-1 victory over Cardiff, while fellow promotion chasers Sheffield Wednesday were held 1-1 at Derby. Bottom side Barnsley finished 1-1 at home to Reading, and QPR were 2-0 winners at Birmingham.
Colin Besley there with all the latest sport.
Yeah, now, polls open here in the UK at 7 a.m. for the country's third general election in less than 5 years. The contest, the first to be held in December in nearly 100 years. We have 650 constituencies across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland up for grabs. The polls close at 10 p.m. this evening. So we're going to bring you special coverage, of course, here on Bloomberg Radio and television.
That's coming on from 10 p.m. tonight once the polls close. And tomorrow we're going to be live from Westminster from 6 a.m. come rain or shine, and that should be interesting, with all the latest on the results and what it means, of course, to the markets in this extremely closely watched election.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, we also have another big decision day here in Europe, which is the European Central Bank and Christine Lagarde's first press conference today. No doubt she will get lots of questions in terms of interest rate policy, but also the first review that the ECB is expected to do in 16 years, and also on climate change, I imagine, because Ursula von der Leyen are laying out this kind of moonshot, this very ambitious idea that Europe can be a leader when it comes to green technology, and that's something that Christine Lagarde has picked up on.
She has, but it's an interesting, because of course there isn't a complete dovetail between the Eurozone and the EU, to state the obvious, and what can be achieved by the Eurozone, by the ECB, may not be able to fit in quite closely enough with what Ursula von der Leyen is trying to do. But it's really interesting because it's moved to a point where many markets are sensing that climate change issues are very much affecting their bottom line. So no longer is it just a campaign by the politicians, it's also there's push coming from markets.
Yes, indeed. I mean, not least the airline industry, of course, signalling that they are not ready to accept any idea that they will have to pay more, because obviously they are one of the key polluters, certainly in Europe. It's planes and cars.
But the problem at the moment, of course, is the alternative to flying places. I mean, Greta Thunberg talking to the climate conference in Madrid this week, she had to get there by boat, and it took her a while. Yeah. The options to not fly places are still not sufficiently developed, and maybe that's going to push that element up the agenda for business to try and find a way through that.
Yeah. Still ahead here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Aramco and the Saudi oil giant hits a $2 trillion valuation on the second day of trading. We're going to get the latest on that story from Dubai next. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
Now, big tech companies used to be seen as some of the world's most desirable workplaces, but now they appear to be losing some of their luster. Facebook and Google have dropped out of the top 10 best places to work in the U.S. That's according to Glassdoor's annual rankings. And this year's top 4, HubSpot, Bain & Company, DocuSign, and In-N-Out Burger. To discuss, we're joined by Glassdoor chief economist Andrew Chamberlain. Andrew, I think the big theme that struck all of us is big tech continuing to drop out. Why? What's going on?
Well, you have to remember, this is the 100 best places to work for. So even being on the list anywhere, even if you dropped, still a great place to work. But the big story with tech is that these big companies have big company problems today. So Facebook, of course, with political scrutiny, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, it's changing what it's like to work there. It's slowing things down and introducing more politics and bureaucracy.
Facebook in particular caught an eye because we talk about that company so much on this program, dropping 16 spots. Just 2 years ago, they were number 1.
Right.
Is it really just becoming a big company?
Well, it's partly that it's changed because of the political nature of some of the controversies. The motto of move fast and break things just really doesn't hold up in an era where your product can disrupt the U.S. election.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And of course, the big news on markets this morning has been that Aramco in trading in the Tadawul in Saudi Arabia has gone through the 2 trillion mark in terms of its valuation on the second day of trading after, of course, the launch of the biggest IPO the world's ever seen yesterday, so keeping an eye on that. Meanwhile, it was a pretty mixed session in Asia following what had been a bit more optimism after the announcement from the Fed. And currently it's looking a bit, reasonably confident in Europe. Stock 600 up 1/10 of 1%, FTSE up 2/10 of 1% at the moment. The CAC the same, DAX up 1/10 of 1%, the IBEX very much similar. So I think an element of measured optimism there. But looking ahead to the US Open, and of course we saw quite an advance following that announcement from the Fed. Currently, S&P and Dow futures up 1/10 of 1%, Nasdaq up 2/10 of 1%. In terms of the bond market at the moment, earlier 10-year Treasury yields had fallen 5 basis points, but now they're hanging pat around 1.8 at the moment. And we're looking, of course, into gilts, given that it is, of course, the UK election day here today. Not much movement there at all at the moment. In oil, also, obviously, with an eye on Aramco, we're keeping an eye on that. WTI, $58.89 the barrel. That's up 0.2 of 1%. Brent crude up 0.4 of 1% at $63.98 the barrel. And cable, 1.32 at the moment. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, thank you. The US sees deeply troubling indications North Korea may be poised for a major provocation. That's according to UN Ambassador Kelly Craft. She says Kim Jong-un regime could launch space vehicles using long-range ballistic technology. It could even test launch intercontinental ballistic missiles designed to attack the US with nuclear weapons. New Zealand police are planning a high-speed mission to recover the bodies left on White Island after a volcanic eruption. The possibility of another remains high, making any attempt to return there risky. 8 people are known to have died on Monday, while 8 others are missing. A further 20 are in intensive care with severe burns, including some Australian patients. And teenage activist Greta Thunberg's been named a Times Person of the Year. The magazine says she has offered a moral call to those willing to act on climate change and hurled shame on those who are not. Yesterday, at a climate summit in Madrid, she accused political and business leaders of looking for loopholes to polish their image in the fight against global warming. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts and more than 100 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, Saudi Aramco has jumped for a second day. The shares climbed by the daily limit to 38.7 rials at the open in Riyadh before trimming some of the gains, with trading volume also surging. That has pushed the oil giant's value beyond the $2 trillion mark that alienated global investors and prompted the kingdom to end up focusing actually on a domestic listing. For more, let's go live now to Dubai, where Bloomberg's reporter for Middle East energy markets, Anthony Di Paola, is standing by. Really good to speak to you, Anthony. Look, Aramco had a great debut, off to a very good start on the second day. How is trading looking now?
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, it's still up. The shares, as you said, were again up 10% in the pre-market trade. They sold off a little bit of that gain during early trading so far. We're about 1 hour into the trading day here in the Middle East, and they were up about 5%, give or take, last time I checked. So they are kind of flirting with that $2 trillion level, but just a little bit below. That's kind of a psychological level, since that was the valuation mooted by the Saudi Crown Prince almost 4 years ago, when he first said that the kingdom's plan was to list shares in Saudi Aramco, surprising a lot of people, both in the kingdom and without. So, we're flirting with that $2 trillion, and it's going to be a real source of interest to see if that valuation holds and for how long.
Well, indeed, Anthony. I mean, the flirtation has certainly been obvious, but going forward into weeks and days and months, I mean, how much further will it go? Will it indeed stay around the $2 trillion mark?
Well, there's a lot of support for the stock in the Saudi market, and that's support both from a point of view of cheering for the company, as well as supporting the price, because there were a lot of bank loans given to retail investors to go in and buy the shares. There are some incentives built in. Local investors can get an extra share for every 10 shares they hold if they keep them for about 6 months. So that's going to be influencing the share price. The stock will also be included in various exchange benchmarks, and that should be coming up later this month. So some of those big money managers that track the exchanges and track the indices will then have to buy in there. We could also see some managed money coming in. So it looks like there's some upside at the moment because of these incentives, because of the fact that the stock is going to be included in more indices, and those other funds will have to buy in. That looks to support it now. So given it'll take us about 6 months or so until we kind of can really see how that shakes out and what the real valuation is. And then we've got up until 1 year until the Saudi government can sell more shares. And at that point, they might even talk about an international listing.
I think one has to also bring into the fact, though, that the Bloomberg survey that we did last month, global money managers put Aramco's fair value at between $1.2 and $1.5 trillion. Look, what do you think are the prospects then of an international listing? All of this amidst the kind of talk around green deals in Europe, the oil market not particularly cooperating.
Yeah, I mean, it really will depend on the oil market. If oil prices were to go up, a lot of what those money market managers and money managers were saying is that you would need to see oil prices a lot higher to justify that $2 trillion valuation. So we've got some time now. This is obviously a heavily supported valuation in the kingdom. If oil prices took a turn for the higher, then potentially the market begins to look at that and say, okay, could be. But yeah, at the moment, the international investors are not seeing the price that high. So we couldn't simply expect that a $2 trillion valuation on the Saudi exchange would translate into $2 trillion elsewhere, that investors would want to put their money there. There are a lot of issues surrounding that we'll have to see unfold over the year.
Indeed, Anthony, thanks so much for doing that. That was Anthony Di Paola, Bloomberg's reporter for Middle East energy markets, taking a look at what Aramco is doing on the Tadawul. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Time is running out before the U.S. says it will impose new tariffs on Chinese imports. Negotiators continued trying to work out a Phase 1 trade deal before Sunday's deadline. Grant Thornton chief economist Diane Swank says an easing of trade tensions can only help the U.S. economy.
If we can hit the pause button on trade and roll back some of these tariffs, we can certainly do well and continue through 2020 without a recession.
J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon says he expects to see a Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China, and warned that another wave of U.S. tariffs would hit markets and U.S. growth. Trade and the economy will be back in the spotlight for Wall Street today after the Fed yesterday, as expected, held the line on interest rates. Lululemon shares may be active today. The yoga wear maker posted strong quarterly results last night, but a disappointing outlook set its shares lower in aftermarket trading. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Batteries running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
This is the Tune In Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Federal Aviation Administration predicted more than a dozen fatal crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX after that first crash a year ago, which was a Lion Air jet that went down, killing all 189 people on board. An FAA document released during a House hearing this morning noted the prediction before the second crash happened last March in Ethiopia, killing 157. Investors are waiting for the Fed decision on the direction of interest rates. That comes at 2 Eastern today, and they're expected to hold rates steady. Investors also watching as Saudi Arabia's oil company Aramco has gained 10% in its debut of trading on the Saudi Stock Exchange. The company's value pushed above $1.8 trillion US. That means it surpassed Apple as the largest listed company in the world.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's currently 8:30 a.m. here in London. A very warm welcome to the programme. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, let's bring you the breaking news line from the SNB, the Swiss National Bank. It's maintaining its policy rate at negative 75 basis points, so basically as expected. Watching the Swissy, the franc against the euro, currently we trade at 1.0934, so we're slightly stronger. The SNB saying that the franc remains highly valued. Of course it does. The SNB says it remains prepared to intervene in markets if needed. So it's sort of reiterating its view in terms of currency and how that impacts on the rates. I mean, the thing that is surprising about the SNB is that they've managed to hold rates at that negative 75 basis point level, even though we've seen cuts from the ECB. We're going to delve into the SNB even more in just a moment with Laura Cooper, who is our Markets Live macro strategist. This as the SNB sees 2019 GDP at around 1%. The prior forecast was for 0.5 to 1% of growth in Switzerland.
Okay, well, let's move on to some of our top stories because last night the FOMC kept interest rates on hold, forecasting no changes through next year's presidential election. Chairman Jerome Powell saying current policy will remain appropriate unless the outlook changes. BlackRock chief fixed income strategist Jeff Rosenberg spoke to Bloomberg after the announcement.
It's a different regime for Fed policymaking, and even if they do start raising rates, they're barely raising rates. This is a far cry from normalization from years ago.
And the all-important dot plot, of course, which everyone keeps an eye on, shows 13 officials predicting no change in rates in 2020, with just 4 predicting a quarter-point increase.
Meanwhile, Christine Lagarde hosts her first ECB policy meeting later, with investors uncertain about the direction that the bank will take under her leadership. Bloomberg Economics says that she may fire the starting gun on the bank's first strategic review since 2003, but Bloomberg Economics doesn't expect sizable revisions to forecasts for growth and inflation. Roger, in terms of the markets and where we are this morning, again, not been much change in the fixed income markets. Negative 32 basis points for German yields. French yields also negative 1 basis point. This around the anticipation, really, for the ECB result. You can follow it all on the terminal, of course. T-Live, go on your Bloomberg terminal for our blog around the European Central Bank's monetary policy decision and also the news conference. It will all kick off at 1:45 Frankfurt time, so 12:45 London time.
And we're kind of central banks-tastic at the moment because another rate cut's looming in Turkey. President Erdogan saying interest rates there will be moving to single digits in 2020. Most economists disagree with his view that lower borrowing costs brings down inflation, but everyone in a Bloomberg survey sees the march to looser policy continuing. That decision's coming at 11 a.m. UK time today, and one other central bank, the Philippines Central Bank, has held their rates 4%.
Yeah, it did this morning. Meanwhile, top corporate news this morning, Saudi Aramco has now surpassed the market value sought by Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, at least in intraday. On its second day of trading, the oil giant again surged by the daily limit. That pushed its value past $2 trillion. That was the valuation originally sought by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before the IPO, but investment bankers convinced him that that was too ambitious. So the question is, will we hit that $2 trillion and stay at that $2 trillion mark? The Tadawul this morning currently is trading down 0.3%.
All right, well, let's take a moment to go back to that SNB decision, which has literally come through in the last few moments here, of holding rates at negative 0.75%. Well, joining us in our London studio, Laura Cooper, Markets Live macro strategist. Laura, good morning. Not unexpected, basically.
No, markets expected a hold, and that's what we saw. And they also expected the central bank to reiterate the need for negative rates and to make a nod to the fact that the currency remains highly valued. So the market move that we saw in the Swiss franc on the back of that statement, I'm not actually that surprised by it. There was some slight pricing for a potential cut, so that's why we're seeing that move today. I think the greater risk going forward, though, is it's likely that we're going to see further Swiss franc strength.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is the constant perennial headache, isn't it, for the SNB? We trade at 1.0931 for the Swissy versus the euro, so stronger just 0.1%. But basically, we're trading in the middle of the range of 108 and 1.11 for the Swiss franc. But yes, I suppose it's surprising, really, that the SNB, in the face of ECB easing, has actually managed to hold its negative 75 basis basis point level. I mean, why is that in your view?
Well, I mean, so we've been in this range of 108, 111 since September, which is somewhat encouraging to the SNB because we saw this comprehensive package of stimulus measures from the ECB in September, which typically would have driven further Swiss franc strength. But since then, we've actually seen it come down a bit from that. But certainly at these levels, it's not enough to provide breathing room for the SNB to try to exit negative rates.
Because it's a haven area for people to go to, and we know that there are some headwinds out there. So I suppose we should see it in that context.
And so what has supported the Swiss franc at these levels is those safe haven flows. It also is an attractive funding currency. But as well, going forward, it will largely take its cues from the external backdrop and less from the domestic forces. So we do have trade tensions potentially escalating with tariffs. And so that is likely, if those are implemented, to see the Euro Swissy probably test fresh 2019 lows.
Yeah, okay, indeed. And of course, that negative 75 basis points is actually amongst the lowest benchmark rate in the world, along with Denmark. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting also maybe to see what happens with the Swissy, given the ECB decision today. We're not expecting any change, though, from Christine Lagarde, not in the first meeting, I suppose.
No, I think markets will be really watching for the press conference and signs of any surprise there. If we do see a dovish tone dominate, if she wants to kind of take over the helm of the Draghi era and maintain status quo, that will likely put upward pressure on the Swiss franc.
And he also, of course, Mario Draghi used to have a very set form of words that he'd use all the time. Christine Lagarde is slightly less known quantity in that regard because she's, after all, not a banker. That's not her background.
And it's likely to be the case that we will see her take more of a big picture view. Now, I would be surprised if she comes out today and has any kind of substantive shift in policy, really trying to build up her credibility, given that it's her first meeting.
Okay, Laura, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Laura Cooper, Markets Live macro strategist, helping us to digest and break the SNB staying on hold in terms of interest rates.
Okay, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. Israel is heading for its third election in less than a year. The country's parliament had until midnight to find a lawmaker who could form a governing coalition, but the deadline passed with a stalemate intact. That's after both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opposition leader Benny Gantz failed to form a government. The vote is set to take place on March the 2nd. Myanmar's leader has told the UN's highest court that allegations of genocide are incomplete and misleading. In 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to neighbouring Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke in The Hague, where she's begun her defence.
This complex situation and the challenge to sovereignty and security in our country when you are assessing the intent of those who attempted to deal with the rebellion. Surely, under the circumstances, genocidal intent cannot be the only hypothesis.
The Nobel Peace Prize winner did, though, acknowledge that disproportionate force may be used at times by the military. European leaders will talk climate change when they meet in Brussels later. At stake is a €1 trillion transition plan into greener energy, known as the European Green Deal. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo has more.
The question is whether or not they'll be able to endorse the ambitious targets by the end of the summit. There are some countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, that do worry about the economic implications of such a transition. In the meantime, they'll also keep an eye on Brexit as election results begin to trickle down. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the US sees deeply troubling indications North Korea may be poised for another major provocation. That's according to UN Ambassador Kelly Craft. She says Kim Jong-un's regime could launch space vehicles using long-range missile technology. It could even test-launch intercontinental ballistic missiles designed to attack the US with nuclear weapons. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Now with this morning's sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Manchester City will be one of the seeds in Monday's Champions League last 16 draw. The Group C winners maintained their unbeaten run in the competition with a 4-1 victory over Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. Tottenham go through as Group B runners-up, but fell to a 3-1 defeat to pace-setters Bayern Munich, Jose Mourinho made a number of changes, but is happy with his selection. There's plenty still up for grabs for the British sides heading into the final round of matches before the last 32 of the Europa League this evening. Manchester United have already progressed and will win Group L if they avoid defeat to Dutch side AZ Alkmaar. Group F leaders Arsenal need a point away to Standard Liège in Belgium to guarantee going through. Second place Wolves can clinch top spot in Group K, but need to win at home to Turkish side Besiktas and hope the other result goes their way. Celtic have already qualified as Group E winners ahead of their game with Cluj, while Group G leaders Rangers will be through with a draw at home to Young Boys of Switzerland.
So that was the sports roundup. Coming up next, Lena Komileva, chief economist at G Plus Economics, joins us on a big central bank day, the ECB decision this lunchtime. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery's running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We heart in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
This is the Tune In Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Federal Aviation Administration predicted more than a dozen fatal crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX after that first crash a year ago, which was a Lion Air jet that went down, killing all 189 people on board. An FAA document released during a House hearing this morning noted the prediction before the second crash happened last March in Ethiopia, killing 157. Investors are waiting for the Fed decision on the direction of interest rates. That comes at 2 Eastern today, and they're expected to hold rates steady. Investors also watching as Saudi Arabia's oil company Aramco has gained 10% in its debut of trading on the Saudi Stock Exchange. The company's value pushed above $1.8 trillion. That means it surpassed Apple as the largest listed company in the world.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Those up the dart toward the end zone. Caught, ball, touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
Mahomes throwing off the back foot. He wants McCall. Hard run. He's got the catch at the 15. Jukes at the 10. 5. Touchdown.
Today, hear the home and away call as the New York Jets visit the Baltimore Ravens at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
It's a block, 20, 25, 30. It's a foot race, 40.
At
50.
home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today. This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Stocks are mixed. The Federal Reserve wraps up its meeting today. It's not expected to raise interest rates, but there will be an update on the economy. Amazon wants to buy delivery company Deliveroo in the UK, but regulators there say the merger would raise serious competition concerns, and it gave the companies 5 working days to offer remedies to address the issues. Amazon says it believes its investment will help Deliveroo to remain competitive in the restaurant delivery market and help it to develop new products for customers. The most generous state in the U.S. on GoFundMe is Massachusetts. The company says $9 billion has been raised in that state since GoFundMe was founded in 2010. Vermont comes in second, followed by Washington, New Hampshire, Colorado, Connecticut, and New Jersey. That's your Fox Business Report. I'm Ginny Cosola. Invested in you.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And, of course, the big news on markets this morning is what was happening on the Tadawul in Riyadh, where Aramco on the second day of trading did go through the $2 trillion valuation that had been expected and indeed wanted, of course, by MBS, the Crown Prince. It's hovering around that at the moment. But looking into the European opening, stocks 600 up 0.2% at the moment, led mainly by tech and automaker shares. Generally, optimism around, climbing gradually. FTSE 100 up almost 0.5%. The CAC up 0.2%. The DAC very much the same, and the IBEX similarly. And we're looking to the US opening, S&P and Dow futures hovering around the up 0.1% at the moment. Nasdaq up 0.2%. In terms of bonds, currently the US 10-year Treasury rose 2 basis points, in fact, hanging at the 1.81 handle at the moment. Germany's 10-year yield declined less than 1 basis point to negative 0.32%, and Britain's 10-year yield fell 1 basis point to 0.769. Keeping an eye on oil too, WTI $58.85 the barrel, that's up 0.1%. Brent crude up 0.4%, 63.99 at the moment. And we're keeping an eye, obviously, on cable in the light of political developments, and currently 1.3211. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. Today, the UK goes to the polls. It's the nation's 4th election in a decade, and it's the second since the Brexit vote in 2016. It's also the first December vote in nearly a century. Polls close at 10 p.m. UK time, and that's tonight. Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting the new leaders of Germany's Social Democrats later today. This comes a week after her junior coalition partners set out demands to remain in government. The SPD is demanding a series of concessions from the Merkel administration, including increased government spending for infrastructure and social welfare. And Botswana is making a second attempt to restart commercial hunts for its elephant population. That's the world's biggest. The government issued a quota for the killing of 272 in 2020, of which foreign hunters hunters will be allowed to shoot 202 and export the trophies. Most hunters in southern Africa come from the US. In Zimbabwe, the right to shoot costs at least $21,000. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans there with the world news. Now, Christine Lagarde will make her debut press conference as ECB president this Thursday lunchtime. It comes after the Federal Reserve in the United States signalled potentially no change to interest rates well into 2020 in the US, and the SNB kept rates unchanged at negative 75 basis points just earlier this hour. Well, joining us this morning is Lena Komileva, who is chief economist at G+ Economics. Very warm welcome to the radio studio. Thank you for joining us, Lena. So look, what do you make then of this bevy of central bank action? Is the kind of anxiety around recession, global slowdown and the trade war abating? Is that where we are?
I think that's a fair assessment. 2019 has been extraordinary in a sense that we seem to be 10 years into a global expansion, yet central banks concertedly pivoted away from a search for neutrality, normality, towards a crisis era tail risk management approach. And so the result has been this concerted downdraft in rates, the return of expanding balance sheets in both the US and Europe. And that has, in a sense, internalized all the market's worst fears. I look at short-term rates these days not as a representation of where the main economies are. They aren't. They're the net present value of future fears about the outlook for the global economy. Now, how these fears evolve will be, of course, down to factors that are completely outside central banks' control, such as political developments, but also a rather structural down cycle in business investment we've seen in the last 2 years that wasn't just to do with tariffs. But it is clear the central banks are now a major force in their balance of risks, and the mind of the markets, we're back into nearly reflation territory.
Do you see any change, though, in terms of easing and the balance sheet expansion, as you say? Do you think that perhaps the review that Lagarde has said that is going to happen at the ECB, does that actually usher in some kind of rethink in terms of normalisation, or do we simply see, modern monetary theory or some other such event in the markets?
Wow, this is a great question. There are like 15 questions in this one. Where do I go? I think, let me just make two key points here. Yes, there is a decided shift towards stronger demand management, and that's partly to do with a structural misalignment in the global economy. We have this tug of war between the old sort of goods, heavy metals, or even auto sector economies, and the new economy, services-based economy, a greening consumer demand, a shift towards electric autos. That combined with the structural shift that's happening in the Chinese economy, which actually has been the driving factor behind this industrial downturn, overlaid by the disruption of global trade links through the US-China strategic economic trade conflict, technological conflict of the last year, means that we are in an environment that's growth disrupted, and central banks are worried about it. How they're going to resolve that, however, is down to, yes, inflation targeting. And I think this is where the second part of your question comes with respect to Christine Lagarde's the likely announcement of a formal policy review today to take place early next year. Mario Draghi's great legacy of the last two meetings was this. He actually shifted the ECB's policy towards symmetric inflation targeting, even if the formal mandate is still below but close to 2%. And the second thing is he actually pivoted monetary action with monetary outcomes. He actually put the ECB back in a position of open-ended QE, record negative interest rates. We're back in crisis era territory for a global economy that it's not as ill as it was back in the crisis era.
Well, in that case, if there is this review coming, Lena, what is it to review? If you're saying that we're already into a slightly different way of looking at inflation and various other things, what are the things that should be in that review if it comes?
Well, Roger, I actually think it's a very good time for the ECB to have a talk among themselves, because this is the extraordinary thing. This inaugural meeting of President Christine Lagarde today is happening against the backdrop of a remarkable breakdown of consensus within the Governing Council, but also among the former ECB staffers I talked to, among the ECB watchers, and among the markets at large about two things. whether the ECB is doing the right thing in terms of focusing on the right objectives and whether it's using the right tools. Now, this is pretty fundamental. And what it basically tells us is that there is room for talk here about where to align policy and what the tools are. I think Christine Lagarde is right to be taking this conversation forward to the formal stage right now, because we all know that the next phase of ECB reflation is not going to happen through more QE. It has to happen through stronger involvement of structural fiscal policy and demand management.
But just on that, is this in a way almost a political gesture? She's after all a politician. She needs the politicians to come on board, particularly in Germany, fiscal stimulus to be there. Might the review be a way of saying, look, we are looking at in this in great detail and changing our ways as a way of perhaps trying to get the politicians in Germany and elsewhere on board as well?
The extraordinary political economy of the euro, and I love the way you framed this. The extraordinary political economy of the euro is that the euro is a political construct in a political union without political cohesion. The only way that its economic survival can be reinforced and strengthened is by improving risk sharing, and that can only happen by moving the focus away from current criticism about negative rates and quantitative easing towards the end game. The end game cannot be negative rates. We don't want Japanification. We want a wholesome, wholesale reappraisal of macro policy that has to give a stronger lever to fiscal and structural policy. And yes, that requires political capital. Is Christine Lagarde the person to take this forward? I say she's the only person to take this forward.
Okay, so that's an interesting endorsement then. What do you make, though, then, of Ursula von der Leyen? Because Christine Lagarde has raised the issue of the Green Deal, and this push for Europe to be more sort of ecologically focused. I mean, I think this is also a fundamental challenge, is it not, that perhaps we don't talk enough about when it comes to investment and economies, is the idea of climate change?
I think this is a great point. The topic about greening the ECB provokes remarkably different outcomes depending who you talk to.
Yeah.
If you speak to the European Commission, they're extremely keen. If you speak to, even some governing council members, they think this is conflating two separate objects. One is green finance, structural, secular. The other one is to do with inflation targeting with the Maastricht Act, with the law. Now, I think that actually, when it comes to green finance, Europe's unification, that sort of Goldilocks scenario of alignment, perfect alignment between political, economic, and financial forces is actually coming into place, because the European Commission has already made it green issues are on the top of the priority. The European Commission's investment arm, the European Investment Bank, is already actively out there issuing a hell of a lot of green bonds. And guess what? The ECB is actively in the market buying EIB bonds. So actually, we're probably not that far away in terms of implementation. But clearly, there has to be a proper discussion and a proper framework formally approved in 2020.
But briefly, the problem is that the ECB's area and the area of the EU, which Ursula von der Leyen will take, are not the same. And there will be people there are people who are emitters of carbon and what have you, who are outside that, who are not going to respond quickly.
Yes, the issue here is really, with respect to the monetary argument, the issue really is about quantitative easing neutrality. There will be concerns if the Christine Lagarde were to endorse a greening of government private sector bond purchases by the ECB in favour of green technologies, that there will be some imbalances between member states. Clearly, we need a political framework before the ECB can move into that space.
Lena Komalova, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Chief Economist at G+ Economics, here in our London radio studio and also on Bloomberg Television this morning. Great to have you. Lots more to come here. This is Bloomberg.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation. But while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, a very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker, standing in for Anna Edwards this morning. Matt Miller, my co-host for this hour, is standing outside a pretty chilly ECB because, of course, Christine Lagarde will be giving her first press conference today as ECB president. Other things we're watching: the UK goes to the polls today. We'll bring you special coverage of the outcome of the general election from 10 p.m. this evening. Saudi Aramco, meanwhile, flirts with a $2 trillion valuation. And, of course, we're digesting the US Federal Reserve, which kept interest rates unchanged yesterday, and all of the comments from Jerome Powell. But first of all, let me bring you a data check on where we are this morning in terms of the markets. So the US Stock 600 this morning gains 0.2%. The FTSE 100 bounces higher, up 0.5%, and the Xetra DAX also gains 0.2% this morning. In terms of the bond markets, we are really on pause, waiting for the ECB decision, it does seem, because we're flat on German yields at negative 32 basis points. US yields stay at 1.81%, so up by 1.5 basis points. The SNB, also the Swiss National Bank, stood pat this morning about an hour ago, holding their interest rates at negative 75 basis points. In terms of the currency space this morning, Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index under a little bit of pressure. The pound gains 0.1%. The euro trades at 1.1135. And in the oil markets, WTI is up by 0.1%. In terms of breaking news lines this morning, I'll just give you the IEA on the 2020 oil demand growth estimate. They hold that steady at 1.2 million barrels a day. They cut their 2020 non-OPEC supply growth estimate, though, to 2.1 million barrels a day, down from 2.3 million barrels a day. So those are all the breaking news lines and the data check. My co-anchor, Matt Miller, though, patiently standing by in Frankfurt today, covering the ECB. Very good morning to you, Matt.
Morning.
So what are we expecting?
So as far as Christine Lagarde, we're not expecting, obviously, any big moves in terms of policy today, but we're looking for her tone, her body language, and a lot of market participants are expecting her to somehow be more successful than Mario Draghi in talking governments into a little bit of fiscal stimulus. Also, probably the most interesting thing is she's going to start a strategy review, and this is the first one the ECB has undergone in 16 years. The last one was 2003. We're going to want to hear as many details about that as we can. She probably won't share very much since they're just starting it, but it'll be interesting to talk about. And she seems to be more open to, let's say, experimental issues, like the possibility of the ECB starting its own cryptocurrency. That's something that she apparently spoke with informally with other ECB governors at their meetings yesterday. So I think a lot of people are just going to be watching to see what kind of ECB President Christine Lagarde is going to be. And then, of course, we'll want to see if she has healed some of the divisions that we saw opening up over the last few meetings at the end of Mario Draghi's term. But it'll be really interesting to see someone new here. You know, I've been coming to these meetings for years and years, and it's always been Draghi who does almost all of the talking. Luis de Guindos typically sits quietly on his right hand side and doesn't really add very much. So I'm not sure exactly what to expect as far as today's meeting, and it's exciting for that reason.
Yeah, exactly. 1:45 p.m. Frankfurt time. I thought that it was interesting that Jean-Claude Trichet, who was speaking on Bloomberg television in recent days, said that she will be pragmatic in his opinion, as was her predecessor, as he was himself. So that's Jean-Claude Trichet's view. You know, when you have to cope with new challenges and new threats, he was saying that you take the appropriate decision after due meditation in the governing council. So, you know, he's perhaps clung on to some of the language that he developed as ECB head himself. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're covering this all day this morning, but I want to bring in also our guest who's in the London radio studio, a little bit warmer, Martin Malone, chief economist at Alpha Book. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Caroline.
So we heard what Matt was saying, outlining what is expected, what people want to hear and see from Christine Lagarde. How important is this meeting, do you feel? Because we're not expecting anything on rates, though.
We're not expecting anything. They already have eased policy this year. Draghi set that up, and they're, as Matt said, they're going to go into the strategic review. The Fed is just finishing its strategic review. We'll get the results of that in a few months' time. And Powell yesterday gave us sort of an indication of that. Actually, he was very uber dovish. But we can jump back to Japan 3 years ago. They did a strategic review. The end of that strategic review was that they've pegged interest rates, 10-year interest rates, at 0.0.
Yeah.
That guarantees...
But is that really likely, do you think? I mean, in the US, obviously, we're far from that.
Very far from that, but the ECB today, they're not going to make that decision today because they're starting the strategic review process. But Lagarde is not a central banker. And this is one of the very positive factors. So they're going to be thinking out of the box and using unconventional monetary policy issues like pegging rates. This was done by the UK. It was done by the US in the 1940s. Japan is now doing it. This is quite likely to be one of the forefronts of the review process, is pegging rates at 0.0 across Europe. And I would expect the ECB is going to eliminate what's called the capital key. And the capital key is how many bonds do you buy across Europe? And therefore, because Germany is the largest economy in the Eurozone, they buy a large amount of German bonds. That is very political development over the last few years to use the capital key, and scrapping it means they have a lot more flexibility to buy bonds all around the Eurozone.
But that's basically more similar. So again, it's a very much more dovish ECB that you're looking at. But my question around the review, though, is it not surely just admitting the reality? Because the talk is all around whether you change the inflation target, whether you make it sort of symmetrical, but actually that would just be kind of admitting where we are at now, not particularly pushing the story forward in terms of dealing with inflation.
Absolutely. I call America the 2% world. Europe is the 1% world. Growth, interest rates and inflation in America are around 2. Those levels are around 1. They're today much less than 1. So the ECB, there's no surprise, they have to be very dovish. But you also must communicate. And one thing that they will not do, they have their deposit facilities at minus 0.5. There is huge pushback on the costs of negative interest rates.
Yeah.
It's costs to the financial system. Look at European financial sector. We've never really had a profit surprise. Look at the insurance companies. They can't get the yields that they need. And this is exactly what the Japanese have done. They've walked back talking about the costs of negative rates. This means that they will have to use non-rate measures. And that's communication, it's balance sheet, and it potentially is purchasing European equities.
Wow, that would be a significant shift.
That's what Japan is now doing.
Yes, it is. And a lot of people are talking about the Japanification of Europe, and obviously where Japan goes, we follow. But I think also the other question really is, the ECB, the idea of actually normalising seems further and further away. So in this set of reports from the ECB today, we also get the first look at 2022, which potentially could be the first time where you get normalisation. But that looks, in your view, even less likely.
Yes, but what's very, very important about Europe choosing Madame Lagarde as the ECB president is this was basically Macron's pick. And with Merkel moving away in the next 12 to 18 months, Macron is almost the European politician, assuming that he'll win the next election. But we call this alignment of policy. And we basically have the central bank and the governments more aligned. And that's what we need to see. That's what Japan does. And this uber-dovishness of Powell was the punch bag for the last 12 months with Trump. Powell may be off the hook for 2020 and may not be. He'll have to find a new punch bag.
Yeah, well, we'll see if the data supports that, of course, because that's also what the Fed is talking about.
But having Madame Lagarde and political alignment with the ECB, that's a key issue for the next 1 to 2 years.
Martin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Martin Malone, who is Chief Economist at Alpha Book. Thank you for your views in terms of the ECB decision. Of course, we're going to get that decision at lunchtime, and you can follow it on the T-Live blog on the Bloomberg terminal. But in the meantime this morning, let's get all the latest in world news. Here's Roger Herring. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Today, the UK goes to the polls. It's the nation's fourth election in a decade, and its second since the Brexit vote in 2016. It's also the first December vote in nearly a century. Polls close at 10 p.m. UK time. French labour unions have pledged to continue their fight against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms. Bloomberg's James Regan says this comes after the government revealed details of its proposals to overhaul the country's retirement system.
Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said on Wednesday that the government intends to introduce a new system from 2025, under which the age for full pension eligibility would be pushed back by 2 years to 64. A reform bill will be submitted to Parliament in February. Labour unions rejected the proposals and pledged to widen and intensify their protests. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, Israel's heading for its third election in less than a year. That's an astonishing development, closely intertwined with Benjamin Netanyahu's legal troubles and might not resolve the political crisis. Bloomberg's Yaakov Bermele reports.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, recently indicted in 3 corruption cases, will square off once more against chief rival, the centrist Benny Gantz, in early March. Both men resisted tremendous pressure to end the political crisis and unite government, largely because Netanyahu rejects Gantz's demand that he step aside once summoned to court. Polls show another closely contested race in Tel Aviv. Kobe Bemelech, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Myanmar's leader has told the UN's highest court that allegations of genocide are incomplete and misleading. In 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to neighbouring Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke in The Hague, where she's begun her defence. The Nobel Peace Prize winner did acknowledge that disproportionate force may have been used at times by the military. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger. Now, with the morning sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Manchester City will be one of the seeds in Monday's Champions League last 16 draw. The Group C winners maintained their unbeaten run in the competition with a 4-1 victory over Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. Tottenham go through as Group B runners-up, but fell to a 3-1 defeat to pace-setters Bayern Munich. Jose Mourinho made a number of changes, but is happy with his selection. There's plenty still up for grabs for the British sides heading into the final round of matches before the last 32 of the Europa League this evening. Manchester United have already progressed and will win Group L if they avoid defeat to Dutch side AZ Alkmaar. Group F leaders Arsenal need a point away to Standard Liège in Belgium to guarantee going through. Second place Wolves can clinch top spot in Group K but need to win at home to Turkish side Besiktas and hope the other result goes their way. Celtic have already qualified as Group E winners ahead of their game with Cluj, while Group G leaders Rangers will be through with a draw at home to Young Boys of Switzerland.
So that's the European sports update. Now still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. The EU is right to correct failures to address climate change. But as Bloomberg Opinion's Andreas Kluth writes, it will be crucial to have the European market on board with the new Green Deal. More on that next after Ursula von der Leyen outlined the roadmap for a greener Europe yesterday. You can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. The Euro Stoxx 600 right now gains 0.2%. We bring you all the markets news and Bloomberg Opinion next. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
No company wants to be involved in an international dispute. But when disagreements arise, you need expertise at your side. Take a closer look at ICDR, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Backed by the longevity and strength of the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of cross-border dispute resolution services, handling more cases than any other institution. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesman to the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Now, big tech companies used to be seen as some of the world's most desirable workplaces, but now they appear to be losing some of their luster. Facebook and Google have dropped out of the top 10 best places to work in the U.S. That's according to Glassdoor's annual rankings. And this year's top 4, HubSpot, Bain & Company, DocuSign, and In-N-Out Burger. To discuss, we're joined by Glassdoor chief economist Andrew Chamberlain. Andrew, I think the big theme that struck all of us is big tech continuing to drop out. Why? What's going on?
Well, you have to remember, this is the 100 best places to work for. So even being on the list anywhere, even if you dropped, still a great place to work. But the big story with tech is that these big companies have big company problems today. So Facebook, of course, with political scrutiny, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, it's changing what it's like to work there. It's slowing things down and introducing more politics and bureaucracy.
Facebook in particular caught an eye because we talk about that company so much on this program, dropping 16 spots. Just 2 years ago, they were number 1.
Right.
Is it really just becoming a big company?
Well, it's partly that it's changed because of the political nature of some of the controversies. The motto of move fast and break things just really doesn't hold up in an era where your product can disrupt the U.S. election.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Danny Berger with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We're looking at stocks edging higher really across the globe. In Europe, the Euro Stoxx 600 is up 0.2%. Then we're seeing U.S. futures higher as well by just about the same amount. Traders here digesting the Fed's signal that they'll keep rates on hold through 2020. Now, with that out of the way, we shift to the ECB policy decision. Of course, there's that December 15th tariff deadline in focus as well. But we're looking at the euro slight gains, but basically unchanged here. But if it did rise, it'd be the fourth day in a row. Bunds also tiding in a trade range. Really some idea here that we're not quite certain what will come out of Christine Lagarde's first ECB decision. Now, in terms of European equities, we're seeing tech automakers leading the rise. And in terms of S&P futures, this would be a halt of a 2-day retreat that started, the halt starting on Wednesday. U.S. 10-year yields also unmoved. Again, a lot to digest here. In Asia, we're seeing the Hong Kong dollar climbing. It surged past 7.8. That's on the upper end of its allowed range. We're seeing HIBOR rates elevated, and that undermines the carry trade, which involves selling the Hong Kong dollar. So that's why we're seeing some of the strength there. Now, in commodities, we're seeing oil steady to gains. It had fallen from a 12-week high on expanded stockpiles. We did hear from the IEA today saying that OPEC plus oil supply cuts won't prevent a surplus in 2020. Even so, Brent trading at just above $60 barrels in dollars a barrel. Meanwhile, WTI at $59. Gold is declining today. Gold spot down about 0.1%, trading under that 1500 mark rather. JP Morgan recommending shorting the Haven metal in one of its top 2020 trades. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Roger Herring with more on what's going on around the world.
Thanks, Danny. Yes, the US sees deeply troubling indications North Korea may be poised for a major provocation. That's according to the UN ambassador Kelly Craft. She says Kim Jong-un's regime could launch space vehicles using long-range missile technology, could even test launch intercontinental ballistic missiles designed to attack the US with nuclear weapons. New Zealand police are planning a high-speed mission to recover the bodies left on White Island after a volcanic eruption. The possibility of another remains high, making any attempt to return there risky. 8 people are known to have died on Monday, while 8 others are missing. And the teenage activist Greta Thunberg's been named Times' Person of the Year. The magazine says she's offered a moral call to those willing to act on climate change and hurled shame on those who are not. Yesterday, at a climate summit in Madrid, she accused political and business leaders of looking for loopholes to polish their image in the fight against global warming. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Now it's 9:20 a.m. here in the City of London. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion, and we're joined by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's been writing about the EU's Green Deal and the importance of aligning this intervention with Europe's market economy. Welcome to the programme. I think that there was one line that stood out to me in your piece. The EU shouldn't slip into central planning, especially if others like China, India and the US are ever to emulate this effort, basically, to sort of make the European Union, deal with climate change. That really struck me.
Well, I'm glad I got your attention. That was the point of the line. We're not quite at risk of central planning yet. The point of the piece was really, yesterday Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, stated this bold goal, which I completely am behind, which is to make the EU carbon neutral by 2050. The question is exactly how, and she did not yet go into the specific legislation, which will take a year and more to come out starting next March. So I'm saying, let's look at the details, and if you break it down, which you and I could now, there are some things that are no-brainers and completely compatible with the market economy, and then there are some things that are where she's on thin ice.
Well, I mean, yeah, I thought that the line was eye-catching. Government intervention, in a world where China is a planned economy and the US sort of has a lot of trade protectionism. But tell us a little bit about where you think von der Leyen has got things right, I suppose.
She's got things right in that she wants to basically. There's a market failure, an externality, and that's climate change. And the way to correct it is to give the externality a price, and that's carbon. So you have to give carbon a high price. You can do that through a carbon tax or through a carbon price in an emissions trading system. Europe has that, and her best idea is to dramatically expand that system so that it covers more industries and so that the allowances go down and the price of carbon goes up for airlines, for cement makers, for anybody. And that price signal would filter through the economy, consumers, producers and investors, and give all of us the right signal to adjust and could get us there. If she stopped there, I think this would be a perfect package.
Matt Miller is over in Frankfurt and listening in. I know that you've got some interesting questions, Matt, and I'll come to you in a minute. But look, we've already had reaction, though, from, as you say, some of the big airlines that could be implicated in these new measures from von der Leyen. Andreas, are you there? I think we may have lost Andreas. That is Bloomberg opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who is joining us. I'm going to try and get back to him in just a minute, because his piece on Bloomberg Opinion, OPIN, on the Bloomberg terminal is really fascinating, sort of looking into what Ursula von der Leyen was suggesting in the roadmap that she gave to the EU yesterday in terms of trying to correct sort of the climate change issue, which has, I guess, so far been something of a market failure, revealing her goals to try to make the EU carbon neutral by 2050. So have a look at that Bloomberg Opinion piece by Andreas Kluth on the terminal this morning. Bloomberg Opinion, of course, can be reached just by typing in OPIN on the Bloomberg terminal. In the meantime, we, of course, are looking ahead to Christine Lagarde making her debut press conference as ECB president later today. We're going to discuss what to expect and get the latest from Frankfurt next. As I say, my co-host for this hour, Matt Miller, is standing outside the ECB, no doubt pretty chilly. In terms of the markets this hour, the US Stoxx 600 gains 0.2%, the FTSE 100 up 0.4%, but we're fairly much on hold in terms of the fixed income markets. We trade at negative 32 basis points, no movement really in benchmark German yields. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Charlie Pellett. Changes on the way for Major League Baseball jerseys, and Nike's logo will be moving to the upper right chest position. It's a far more prominent position than the majestic athletic logo previously on sleeves. Beginning in January, Nike becomes the exclusive provider of MLB's online uniforms. Russia's Boxing Federation says its boxers will only take part in the Tokyo Olympics if doping sanctions forcing them to compete as neutral athletes are overturned. Those sanctions were announced earlier this week. And online sports betting is reviving New Jersey's gaming industry. Regulators say sports betting, which was introduced in June of last year, generated $96 million in revenue in the first 10 months of this year. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Charlie Pellett.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane of the rim, throwing right corner three. Another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning. I'm Matt Miller in Frankfurt, where it's 10:30.
And here in London, 9:30 a.m., I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. So, Matt, in the markets, as we anticipate the ECB meeting Christine Lagarde's first press conference, so we have the US stock 600 gaining 0.25%. The other big one to watch, of course, is euro dollar on the outcome. We've seen overnight volatility really rise quite a lot ahead of the decision day. So the euro trading flat at the moment, 1.1129. German bund yields, Italian bonds also little changed ahead of the decision. So we're negative 32 basis points for German yields. We're up by just over 1 basis point on US yields, 1.8%. This after the Fed very much giving the market the indication that will be on hold in terms of interest rate policy in the US until 2020. So really hanging on for the US presidential election and beyond. And just lastly, in the markets, in terms of the big calls that we've seen this morning, JP Morgan's top 2020 trades, they're saying short gold and buy a raft of stocks instead. So recommending risk on trades from JP Morgan. That caught my eye, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got actually an expert here on the ECB to talk to us about what to expect from Christine Lagarde's first policy meeting. Madame Lagarde will be judged on how convincingly she communicates the institution's plan to restore price stability. I've even heard one bank expecting she could misspeak. Of course, a lot of times new central bankers do that. There was a moment when Jay Powell was accused of that. There was a moment when many of his predecessors, I don't recall Mario Draghi misspeaking.
No,
but maybe. Let's bring in Jana Randau right now, Bloomberg's European economy editor. Jana, what do you think? Did Draghi, by the way, you wrote the book on Draghi. Did he ever have a rookie mistake?
He certainly had a few moments where he confused investors a little bit, where the market reaction was not the one that he had anticipated. But in terms of big mistakes, I don't remember, actually.
So what are you expecting from Christine Lagarde? She's not a mistake-prone person, frankly.
No, she's one that that knows very well how to communicate. So I expect a very eloquent press briefing this afternoon. In terms of policy itself, there's probably not a whole lot to announce. Interest rates are at a record low, asset purchases are well underway. So in that sense, we are most likely to hear a confirmation that things will go according to that plan also in the future, in the following months. What will be interesting is new economic forecasts. They will include a first glance at 2022, a first reading of inflation there. So that's probably the one number that we will look at most. As for the rest of the projections, they should remain more or less unchanged from the September readings, a few tweaks here and there, but nothing major. The one thing that could be interesting is the policy review that everybody has been talking about.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, in terms of the numbers, we're expecting a slight uptick both in inflation and growth, but still around the 1% level. Is that your thought? And then the review, as you say, lots of people expecting the sort of formal announcement today, right?
Yes, very much so. And it'll be very interesting to see how comprehensive it will actually be. So she's said in the past that she will leave no stone unturned, wants to look at everything from the inflation goal to instruments to climate change even, and how the ECB can make a contribution to fighting it. Whereas her chief economist, Philip Lane, has said it should be a relatively narrow exercise or it may never get done. So anything that will be announced on that will be hugely interesting. Also to know what the ECB will be working on for the next couple of months.
You know, I was wondering about the divided council. In his last few meetings, Mario Draghi divided the governing council in a way that became obvious when certain members would speak publicly. You literally wrote the book on Mario Draghi, L'artifice.
L'artefice.
Sorry?
L'artefice.
Okay, it's in Italian, so I have trouble with it, and we're eagerly waiting the English
same here.
translation.
I can tell you it'll be out in Chinese before long. So,
Jana, when is it going to come in a language I can understand?
That's a question I ask the publishers every single week, and I hope they will have an answer for me in due course.
All right. So, but anyway, you know a lot about this council division, and are they expecting, you think, Christine Lagarde to be able to heal these rifts?
I think so, and she's made quite a few moves into that direction already. During her first governing council meeting, she actually took them on a retreat to a place outside Frankfurt, to a nice castle resort. And they talked about how they want to work together in the future, how they want to share information, how they want to shape the discussions. So a lot of people that I spoke to going in Lagarde's presidency were rather skeptical because she doesn't have an economic background. She's never worked in a central bank before, so they were all a bit skeptical. Is she going to be able to pull this off? Speaking to the same people a couple of weeks after that, relatively recently, they've all said, oh, she's very charming. She goes out of her way to listen to us, to make sure that all our concerns are basically taken on board. It's a very collegiate feeling there right now. So in terms of sentiment and spirit, she's already made a big contribution.
Okay, so some significant inroads even before the first major policy announcement. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Jana Rando, for joining us, Bloomberg's Europe economy editor there in Frankfurt. So after that, let's get all the latest in global news headlines. Here's Bloomberg's Roger Hearing. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Israel is heading for its third election in less than a year. The country's parliament had until midnight to find a lawmaker who could form a governing coalition. But the deadline passed with the stalemate intact. This after both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opposition leader Benny Gantz failed to form a government. The vote is set to take place on March the 2nd. Myanmar's leader has told the UN's highest court that allegations of genocide are incomplete and misleading. In 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fled to neighbouring Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke in The Hague, where she's begun her defence.
This complex situation and the challenge to sovereignty and security in our country, when you are assessing the intent of those who attempted to deal with the rebellion, Surely, under the circumstances, genocidal intent cannot be the only hypothesis.
That said, the Nobel Peace Prize winner did acknowledge that disproportionate force may have been used at times by the military. Climate change is top of the agenda when European leaders meet in Brussels later. At stake is a €1 trillion transition plan into greener energy known as the European Green Deal. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo reports.
The question is whether or not they'll be able to endorse the ambitious targets by the end of the summit. There are some countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, that do worry about the economic implications of such a transition. In the meantime, they'll also keep an eye on Brexit as election results begin to trickle down. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And the U.S. House Judiciary Committee is set to conclude a debate on articles of impeachment against President Trump. The likely result is a party-line vote that will send the measures to the floor of the House. This morning, the Democratic majority is expected to beat back a number of Republican amendments. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger. Now, for your European sports news, here's Colin Besley.
Manchester City will be one of the seeds in Monday's Champions League last 16 draw. The Group C winners maintained their unbeaten run in the competition with a 4-1 victory over Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. Tottenham go through as Group B runners-up, but fell to a 3-1 defeat to pace-setters Bayern Munich. Jose Mourinho made a number of changes, but is happy with his selection. There's plenty still up for grabs for the British sides heading into the final round of matches before the last 32 of the Europa League this evening. Manchester United have already progressed and will win Group L if they avoid defeat to Dutch side AZ Alkmaar. Group F leaders Arsenal need a point away to Standard Liège in Belgium to guarantee going through. Second place Wolves can clinch top spot in Group K but need to win at home to Turkish side Besiktas and hope the other result goes their way. Celtic have already qualified as Group E winners ahead of their game with Cluj, while Group G leaders Rangers will be through with a draw at home to Young Boys of Switzerland.
The Young Boys of Switzerland. All right, let's get over to the U.S. sports. For that, we bring in Pete Fox. Pete?
Manchester City will be one of the seeds in Monday's Champions League last 16 draw. The Group C winners maintained their unbeaten run in the competition with a 4-1 victory over Dinamo Zagreb in Croatia. Tottenham go through as Group B runners-up, but fell to a 3-1 defeat to pace-setters Bayern Munich. Jose Mourinho made a number of changes, but is happy with his selection. There's plenty still up for grabs for the British sides heading into the final round of matches before the last 32 of the Europa League this evening. Manchester United have already progressed and will win Group L if they avoid defeat to Dutch side AZ Alkmaar. Group F leaders Arsenal need a point away to Standard Liège in Belgium to guarantee going through. Second place Wolves can clinch top spot in Group K but need to win at home to Turkish side Besiktas and hope the other result goes their way. Celtic have already qualified as Group E winners ahead of their game with Cluj, while Group G leaders Rangers will be through with a draw at home to Young Boys of Switzerland.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me, I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
As Ben Franklin said, taxes are one of the certainties of life. Tax reform and the Wayfair decision have brought opportunities, surprises, and challenges to corporate taxpayers. New and complex regulations such as GILTI and FDII mean intercompany transactions, transfer pricing, and business combinations need to be reevaluated. Companies also face additional state sales and income tax exposure. What worked in the past may not work today. EisnerAmper can help. That's a certainty. Visit EisnerAmper.com/tax certainty.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how visit stoptextstoprex.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
The S in Audi S-Line stands for many things like sporty, stylish, streamlined, and now seductively priced. Like the new Audi A4 S-Line, which you can now have from £359 per month, £2,154 initial rental. Test drive one at your local Audi centre, but you'll have to be swift. The offer ends soon. Search Audi S-Line. Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik. With 48-month contract hire, 10,000 miles per annum, 18s and over, subject to status. Damage charges may apply. No ownership. Ordered by 31st of December 2019 from participating centres. Audi Financial Services. Visit audi.co.uk.
Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. Thank you for always doing everything you could to make this time of year special for us. No one has a Christmas jumper collection quite like yours. Your festive spirit...
Gingerbread latte with 2 shots and nutmeg whipped cream for Joe.
I hope it snows. I know how you love a white Christmas. All my love, Joe. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app and get 20% off when you buy a card and gift this Christmas. Use code HEARTFELT20. Exclusions apply.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three, another
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Bureau in Frankfurt, I'm Matt Miller. This is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We are looking at equity indexes across Europe that are up. FTSE gaining 0.5% right now at 33 points to 72.48. The CAC up 1/3% or 20 points to 58.79. And the DAX gaining 1/4% or 35 points to 13,182. If you're prepping for the U.S. Open, you're likely to see a risk-on day there as well. Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ 100 mini futures are all gaining 0.2% to 0.25% this morning. So you could see investors wading into risk assets. They certainly are selling off safe haven assets. You've got the 10-year yield sold off, pushing the yield up to 1.8052. The U.S. dollar strengthening against the Japanese yen. You can now buy 108.6625 yen for your dollar. And gold is down to 1473.37 a troy ounce. Quick look at some of the other currencies. The euro trading at 111.28. Very little movement there. The pound holding up over $1.32. Right now trading at 1.3205 in dollar terms. And Brent crude is gaining as well. The global benchmark for oil up to $64.19 as Saudi Aramco trades up 8%. Again, pushing the biggest company in the world to a valuation of more than $2 trillion. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now let's get back over to Roger Herring for more on what's going on around the world. Roger?
Thanks, Matt. Now, today the UK goes to the polls. It's the nation's fourth election in a decade, and it's the second since the Brexit vote in 2016. It's also the first December vote in nearly a century. Polls close at 10 p.m. UK time. Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting the new leaders of Germany's Social Democrats later today. This comes a week after her junior coalition partner set out demands to remain in government. The SPD is demanding a series of concessions from the Merkel administration, including increased government spending for infrastructure and social welfare. And Botswana is making a second attempt to restart commercial hunts for its elephant population, the world's biggest. The government issued a quota for the killing of 272 in 2020, of which foreign hunters will be allowed to shoot 202 and export trophies. Most hunters in southern Africa come from the US. In Zimbabwe, the right to shoot costs at least $21,000. Global news 24 hours a day on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Wait, are you talking about shooting elephants?
That is what they do, yes, and they charge for it too.
Unbelievable. I don't know how you could kill an elephant. They seem like such intelligent, majestic, caring animals. I'm wearing my duck hunting outfit right now, literally because it's so cold here in Frankfurt. But ducks are a lot easier, I think, to understand than elephants. All right, with that out of the way, or maybe I should never have brought it up. Let's get over to Amy Morris in New York, preparing for Bloomberg Daybreak. Amy, you're not an elephant hunter, are you?
I'm not an elephant hunter, and I really dig ducks as well. So I'm not sure I can stand by you on that one, Matt. But we do want to start with the European Central Bank. Christine Lagarde with her debut press conference. The European Central Bank president today, not an economist. So we're going to listen very closely to her tone, what exactly she has to say about that wide strategy policy review. We're going to talk about that with Bloomberg's David Powell. That's later this morning. Also, Lali Tachala is the senior fund manager at JOHCM. And she'll be joining us with insight into yesterday's Fed meeting, the Fed's projection into non-moves in 2020. The idea that the labor market still has some slack left over, we're going to dig into that a bit too. We'll also, of course, look at the impeachment proceedings on Capitol Hill. Those wheels are in motion, where they stand now, what that timeline is. All of that coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, looking forward to it. Amy Morris coming up. If you're listening on Sirius XM channel 119, you will hear... Wait, Amy, are you in Washington or New York?
I'll be in Washington.
She is in Washington, in Washington, D.C. for a change. So you get Daybreak out of D.C. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you will hear Bloomberg Surveillance, which I believe is fully broadcast out of London today. Tom is over in London, so you'll hear Tom and Francine if you're listening on London DAB digital radio.
Yeah, Tom Keane and John Ferry joining us in the London headquarters. Meanwhile, let's talk a bit more, Matt, about the Federal Reserve from yesterday, which left interest rates unchanged, also signalled that it would keep them on hold through 2020, so on the sidelines in a presidential election year in the US. But according to our next guest, the lower for longer consensus perhaps getting a bit overcrowded. For more, let's bring in Stephen Major, who is Global Head of Fixed Income Research at HSBC. Warm welcome to the radio studio. Thank you for joining us, Stephen.
Good morning.
So then, in terms of how you position for 2020, you're actually expecting higher yields going forwards, or at least in some markets?
Actually, No, our forecast is for lower yields.
So we're getting to the top at the end of this year, are we?
Yeah, so just to think this through, there's a fairly healthy tension that informs today's yield level. So if you take the 10-year Treasury, it's 1.8. Why is it there? It's not a precise estimate of today's growth rate. It's a projection over the next 10 years. So that healthy tension is the risk that we have something bad happen that pulls us towards zero, like in Japan, or on the other extreme, something that pulls the yield higher, like a reflation scenario or something to do with the Fed system review or whatever. And we're kind of stuck in the middle. So our forecast is 1.5. It's consistently been one of the lowest ones on the Bloomberg screen, I think. To go from 1.8 to 1.5 is not very exciting. To me, it's probably likely that in the first half of the year, yields drift higher and maybe go towards 2 or something, and then second half of the year is when it's more likely that we'll move towards 1.5 as the Fed's next move is more likely than not to be downwards. Now they're clearly indicating they're on hold. This time last year they were telling us they were going to 3 something. So I don't know how much use there is using the Fed's projections to forecast the bond market. So for me, one thing that's not going to happen is there's not going to be a smooth glide path between 1.8 and 1.5 as per our forecasts. In all probability,
so up then down.
Yeah, it's more likely that in the near term, something to do with maybe the cyclical seasonal pattern, some near-term inflation pressure. I mean, you saw yesterday the inflation was higher than expected. The Fed is telling us they're willing to tolerate that. That's difficult for the bond market, and I would expect the risk is higher near-term yields, but it doesn't make me a bond bear. It just means I'm waiting for better opportunities to buy.
By the way, on inflation, Stephen, I noticed that so the Trump administration has different tranches of tariffs it's put on China, right? And the first tranche, they put tariffs on stuff that we only get 7% of that stuff from China. So there was a lot of substitution that was possible. And then the second tranche of tariffs, they put tariffs on stuff that still we only get less than 30% of it from China. So still you could substitute. This tranche that's coming on Sunday, apparently it's tariffs on stuff that we get 86% of that stuff we get from China. So it's very difficult to substitute. We're going to have to pay up in essence if we want to get it. Is that going to start pushing inflation higher and higher if we continue to get these tariffs?
Yeah, it probably will, and it's going to be of a transitory nature. And this is the problem for you as reporters in the market. You want to hang every piece of movement in the market on a piece of daily data. But the bond market looks through all of that. The 10-year interest
the bond market's so smart.
Well, no, it's just sophisticated. It's a weighted average, right, of 21 cash flows over 10 years. So it can't be based on what's happening today. But you're right. Inflation probably surprises to the upside, and it's going to be transitory in nature. But the thing is, the bond market will find it patronizing for the Fed to communicate stuff like "Don't worry," and "Don't worry, we're trying to run it hot." How are you supposed to explain that to a bond trader or to a spot trader who lives on the day-to-day basis of what's happening? And they're going to think, well, hang on, this is a bit odd. The Fed is easing policy. It's building the balance sheet. It's cutting rates. It's indicating it's going to stay low. And inflation's going up. And what they were taught at university was higher inflation means the central bank will push rates up to try and control that inflation. So it's very difficult for people. And I guess that's the challenge for the first half of the year. In the full knowledge that the Fed's system review, the framework review, is being leaked into the market. It's being transmitted into the Fed's current reaction function. In that full knowledge, rather than there being some jump risk on an announcement date in 2020, I think that's how you see it. It's bleeding in. So in the first half of the year, I'm a better buyer. I'm looking for higher yields. Now, I want to be very clear about that. I cannot be bearish bonds. I cannot be short the market. I want to buy when the yields are a bit higher than they are now.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah,
Stephen
awesome
Major.
to get some time with you, Stephen.
Yeah, always a nuanced take on the markets.
In town to hang out with Pharaoh, no doubt.
That's right, that's why I've come.
Yeah, good stuff.
It's the elephant in the room.
Global Head of Fixed Income Research at HSBC, Stephen Major there, speaking to us in the radio studio. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Up next, our colleagues in the US with Daybreak Nathan Hager coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Ah, Christmas, a time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Middle of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, December 12th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
The Fed stands pat through 2020, looking to stay on the sidelines in an election year.
Now the focus shifts to the ECB as President Christine Lagarde takes the podium for the first time.
Saudi Aramco surges again, pushing the oil giant's valuation to $2 trillion.
The House Judiciary Committee is set to finish debating articles of impeachment today, and Elizabeth Warren may be overestimating the proceeds of her wealth tax. I'm John Tucker. Those stories straight ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. Rare win for the Knicks in overtime at Golden State and a 10-game losing streak. The Nets lost to Charlotte. The Jets play tonight in Baltimore.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stocks edging higher today. We're coming up to 501 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 6 points this morning. Dow futures up 50. NASDAQ futures up 21. The DAX in Germany is up 0.4%. So is the CAC in Paris. FTSE 100 up 0.6%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 0.1%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong jumped 1.3%. 10-year Treasury down 3/30 seconds. Yield 1.80%. Yield on the 2-year 1.61%. COMEX gold is up 0.2% or $2.80 at $14.7780 an ounce. The euro 1.1127 against the dollar. The yen at 108.68. Amy.
Karen, we begin with the Federal Reserve signaling interest rates will remain unchanged through 2020.
Our economic outlook remains a favorable one, despite global developments and ongoing risks. With our decisions through the course of the past year, we believe that monetary policy is well positioned to serve the American people by supporting continued economic growth, a strong job market, and inflation near our symmetric 2% goal.
In a 50-minute press conference, Chairman Jerome Powell repeatedly said the labor market can still improve despite unemployment at a half-century low.
The Fed's latest dot plot shows 13 officials predicting no change to rates next year, and 4 policymakers forecasting a quarter-point increase. Jeffrey Rosenberg is Senior Fixed Income Portfolio Manager at BlackRock.
This is no longer a preemptive Fed. This is a Fed that is trying to generate inflationary pressures, and that's partly what you see, I think, in that path of those dots.
So the federal funds target range holds steady at 1.5% to 1.75% as uncertainties remain from the U.S.-China trade war and slowing global growth. Scott Minerd is Chief Investment Officer at Guggenheim.
Some of the members of the committee actually believe the real neutral rate is negative. So, maybe the neutral rate isn't 2.5 or 2.25, maybe it's closer to 1.5. And that's the kind of debate I think they're having internally. And they're just groping in the dark to figure out what to do at this point because they're in unexplored territory.
So signs point to the Fed standing pat through 2020, staying on the sidelines in an election year.
Chairman Powell also discussed how the Fed will respond to stress in the repo market in response to a question from Bloomberg's Michael McKee. Here he is with details from our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington.
They're looking at changing bank regulations and the possibility of buying not just T-bills, but longer maturity securities as well, and a standing facility to enable banks to borrow when needed, though no decisions have been made.
We think that the pressures appear manageable, and we stand ready to adjust the details of our operations as necessary to keep the federal funds rate in the target range.
With repo, as with rates, the message from the meeting was status quo. We have things under control, and we'll try to keep it that way. Powell, however, acknowledged there are no guarantees, talking about how he stood before reporters last year at this time when the Fed was raising rates and considering doing so again. In Washington, Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Michael, thank you. Up next, we get a policy decision from the European Central Bank, plus Christine Lagarde's first press conference as president. Analysts expect no change to policy, but Lagarde could face questions about how to deliver more stimulus with rates already in negative territory. Paul Sheard is a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School.
When a central bank is running low on interest rate ammunition, that is a surefire sign that the time has come to bring in fiscal policy, not on a temporary basis, but to help monetary policy out, and for the two of them to work together in the same direction until it's mission accomplished.
And Lagarde and former President Mario Draghi have both pressed for additional government spending. Lagarde's communication will be closely watched today. After a career as a lawyer and politician, she's the first ECB leader to have never worked as a central banker.
Turning to corporate news now, Saudi Aramco has reached a milestone. Shares jumped by the daily limit again to push the oil giant's valuation beyond $2 trillion. Here with more is Bloomberg's Anthony Pola in Dubai.
There was a lot of domestic support and regional support for the IPO. Local investors will get basically one share for every 10 shares they hold after 6 months if they keep the stock. So there's incentive to keep the shares. There's not really incentive to sell for people there.
The soaring valuation could complicate efforts for an international listing. Global investors previously balked at Saudi Aramco's targeted valuation of $2 trillion.
Meantime, global oil markets still face a surplus next year, even if OPEC delivers new production cuts, as according to the International Energy Agency, which sees inventories accumulating by 700,000 barrels a day in the first quarter. The IEA says supplies outside OPEC, especially U.S. shale, continue to grow much faster than global demand. Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is up 0.5% or 28 cents at $59.04 a barrel. Brent is up 0.8% at $64.21.
In Asia today, chip stocks led a rally in equities, which saw the MSCI Asia Pacific Index gain 0.5%. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joining us now from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Amy and Karen. In Taipei, shares in TSMC surpassed South Korea's Samsung once again in terms of market cap, rising to a record and boosting the TAIEX to its highest level since 1990. The Kospi jumped the most in 3 months, also boosted by yet another upbeat 2020 broker forecast. This time Citi, which sees the Kospi gain around 12% more than Wednesday's close over the course of next year. And the Nikkei gained 0.1% in Tokyo, despite data showing Japan's core machinery orders fell more than forecast in October. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Julia, thank you. In the UK, voting underway in today's election. We'll bring you results and analysis and special UK election coverage later today on Bloomberg.
It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in John Tucker with more of what's going on in the world. John.
And Amy, good morning. The House Judiciary Committee set to finish debating articles of impeachment against President Trump today, with a likely party line vote to send the resolution to the floor of the House. Arizona Democrat Greg Stanton, a Judiciary Committee member, urged his Republican colleagues to consider several key questions at a late-night hearing.
Did the president grossly abuse his power? Did his actions harm our nation? And if unchecked, is the president likely to repeat his behavior?
Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio reacted strongly to the upcoming committee vote.
They're never going to stop with their attacks because they can't stand the fact that President Trump is actually draining the swamp and doing what he said he would do, and most importantly, getting results.
Senate Republicans say there's an early consensus building within their ranks for a short impeachment trial that could see the GOP-led chamber vote on a likely acquittal of President Trump without hearing from any witnesses. Senator Elizabeth Warren is overestimating the proceeds of her wealth tax by at least $1 trillion. That's according to new estimates from the Penn-Wharton budget model. It's raising questions about the Democratic presidential candidate's plans to fund her sweeping proposals to reshape the economy. Growing concern about anti-Semitic incidents nationwide after Tuesday's hours-long shootout at a Jewish grocery store in New Jersey that left 6 people dead, including a police officer and the 2 suspects. Authorities now say surveillance footage of the attack uncovered by investigators showed it was targeted. Jersey City Mayor Steve Hullopp is mourning the loss of lives in his city.
There is no question that this is a hate crime, and anti-Semitism should be called out aggressively and firmly, immediately for what it is.
Authorities also warn that several fake GoFundMe pages have popped up purporting to raise funds for the family of the slain officer. And UN Ambassador Kelly Croft is warning the U.S. is seeing troubling indications that North Korea is poised for major provocation. It comes as Kim Jong-un's year-end deadline for concessions approaches. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Amy.
All right, thank you, John. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. It is time now for a Bloomberg NBC Sports update. Here's John Stashauer.
Amy, the Knicks and Warriors, the 2 worst teams in the NBA. Knicks have been bad for most of the last 2 decades. Golden State's made the finals the last 5 years, but with injuries and defections, they're nothing like that team. And the Knicks able to beat the Warriors in San Francisco, 124-122 in overtime to end a 10-game losing streak. Marcus Morris with 36 points, Elfrid Payton and pulling out the win.
It was huge for us to get this win, especially not only the losing streak that we're on, but the way we started the game. We had control of the game the whole game, and kind of let it get away from us in the second half. So to still regroup in this overtime and get the win was huge.
First win for the new coach, Mike Miller at Barclays. Nets blew a 20-point lead, lost to Charlotte 113-108, ending Brooklyn's 3-game win streak. Devontae Graham poured in 40 for the Hornets. Kawhi Leonard back in Toronto, first time since leading the Raptors to the title. His Clippers won by 20. Lakers and Bucks both won again. They are both 22-3. Good win for Rutgers, 72-65 over Wisconsin. Second straight night of Big Ten upset as Illinois down 5th-ranked Michigan. The last Thursday night game of the NFL season figures to be a mismatch. John Harbaugh's Ravens, a 17-point favorite to beat the Jets.
Our guys don't take anybody for granted. You never can, you never should, but certainly not a team that's won 4 of the last 5 games. It has players like Le'Veon Bell and Anderson and Darnold on offense, and our guys do understand that. I do appreciate that about our guys.
Baltimore's won 9 in a row. Another big baseball signing, Anthony Rendon with the Angels, total package of nearly $250 million. The Mets signed pitcher Michael Wacha. We're at the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashauer. Amy.
All right, thank you, John. Another goal for streaming companies when it comes to European soccer. Amazon and DAZN have edged out Sky to secure exclusive rights to stream coverage of Europe's top club soccer competition in Germany. Comcast's Sky had dominated coverage of the UEFA Champions League tournament over the past 2 decades. And a quick check on markets now. S&P futures up 0.2%. Dow futures up 0.2%. NASDAQ futures up 0.25%. 10-year yield at 180, 2-year yield at 161, and the 30-year yield at 223. Much more to come on Bloomberg Daybreak. We'll talk with Senior Fund Manager Lolly Topchali at JOHCM.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/.
Better get it right. This ain't a game.
The game sale is now on. Discover huge savings on consoles, games, accessories and more. In-store and online at game.co.uk. Click and collect at your Westfield Game Store. Get it in-store. Get it online. Get it right with Game.
Better get it right. Better get it right. This ain't a game.
Search Game to find out more.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for, or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Now, big tech companies used to be seen as some of the world's most desirable workplaces, but now they appear to be losing some of their luster. Facebook and Google have dropped out of the top 10 best places to work in the U.S. That's according to Glassdoor's annual rankings. And this year's top 4, HubSpot, Bain & Company, DocuSign, and In-N-Out Burger. To discuss, we're joined by Glassdoor chief economist Andrew Chamberlain. Andrew, I think the big theme that struck all of us is big tech continuing to drop out. Why? What's going on?
Well, you have to remember, this is the 100 best places to work for. So even being on the list anywhere, even if you dropped, still a great place to work. But the big story with tech is that these big companies have big company problems today. So Facebook, of course, with political scrutiny, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, it's changing what it's like to work there. It's slowing things down and introducing more politics and bureaucracy.
Facebook in particular caught our eye because we talk about that company so much on this program, dropping 16 spots. Just 2 years ago, they were #1.
Right.
Is it really just becoming a big company?
Well, it's partly that it's changed because of the political nature of some of the controversies. the motto of move fast to break things just really doesn't hold up in an era where your product can disrupt the U.S. election.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are edging higher in Europe along with U.S. stock index futures as investors digest the Federal Reserve's signal that U.S. interest rates will remain unchanged through 2020 while preparing for the European Central Bank's policy decision. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 6 points. Dow futures up 44. NASDAQ futures up 20. The DAX in Germany is up 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32, yield 1.80%. The yield on the 2-year 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 37 cents at $59.13 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.2% or $2.80 at $14.7780 an ounce. The euro 1.1129 against the dollar. British pound 1.3188 and the yen at 108.68. Today we're watching for another reading on inflation with the producer price index at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with the weekly initial jobless claims number. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index is out at 9:45. Adobe, Oracle, and Costco among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's John Tucker with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, John.
And Kara, the House Judiciary Committee set to finish debating articles of impeachment against President Trump today with a likely party line vote to send the resolution to the floor of the House. The committee opened formal debate last night. New estimate shows Senator Elizabeth Warren is overestimating the proceeds of her wealth tax by at least $1 trillion. And it's been a good year for Manhattan's apartment landlords. And November was their best month yet. Units leased for a median $3,502, according to appraiser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman. Sports. Jets play the Ravens in Thursday night football. Basketball, the Knicks beat the Warriors in OT, and the Celtics fell to the Pacers. Hockey, the Capitals beat the Bruins. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Amy.
All right, thank you, John. It is 5:20 now on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. The Fed left rates on hold yesterday. That was expected. But the dot plot from Fed members also now shows the central bank making no moves for all of next year. We want to bring in Lali Tapchali, the senior fund manager for JOHCM, to bring us more on the decision and some of the other market news this morning. Lali, I want to thank you for taking the time with us this morning. And just your thoughts. What stood out for you in the Fed decision and in Chair Powell's commentary?
Good morning, Amy. It was really a non-event, and I'm surprised, why people are so focused on the dots, because, let's be honest, they never get the dots right.
They never get the dots right. But how about the chair's response to questions about stress in the repo market?
I think, so first of all, you got to give him props. I mean, he has done increasingly a brilliant job in his communication, right? When he first started, we certainly had some wobbles, so he certainly has come a long way. I think there are still concerns remain, and I think what worries me is two fronts. One is we've seen this issue before, where earlier in the year, the market participants had warned the Fed that there were signs of stress, and I think the response was, yes, we see, but we don't think it's that bad. And then we had these two episodes of spikes in repo. So it's, the concern I have is, are there signs that they're missing? It is encouraging that they stand ready to act, and I think that's what one of Fed's mandate is. But I'm not 100% convinced how preventative they are versus how reactive they're going to be. And year-end is always very difficult. The question is how difficult it's going to be.
I want to get back to something that you said about the dots, that they never get it right, because I've heard you say that before here on Bloomberg Radio, and I want to talk a little bit about that coming up in the next year. If they don't get it right, what is it going to take to turn them in the coming year? What do you see happening then?
I mean, clearly they're focused on inflation. So the question is, can they generate inflation to change their view? Because that's probably the worst scenario where growth picks up and suddenly you generate inflation, which then their message starts getting hawkish. Clearly, if you look at the indicators now, there's just not much of a sign of an inflation, so they're on a holding pattern. But that's clearly a hawkish Fed would certainly create a lot more jitters for the market. I mean, dot plans, look, I think it's clearly their job, and I totally appreciate they're trying to be more transparent. But just look at the last year. Everybody thought the rates were going up, so did they, and then it was an entire 180 turn. So it's very hard to predict. So take it as a guidance, take it as a data point, but really don't put all your eggs in one basket that the dot plan is here to hold.
And coming up and later this morning, we're expecting a decision from the ECB. No change to policy, obviously, but everybody's listening to what Christine Lagarde may have to say. It is her first press conference as ECB president. What are you going to be listening for? Her
obviously it's first. So her tone, her message in terms of fiscal union versus where she thinks on rates. I don't think she's a fan of negative rates, but she's a very impressive person, and I think people have said it. Her background on being a little bit of a master in politics is almost what we need at this time, because it's more about getting these different views within Europe on board and how to tackle growth going forward. Because clearly, I think the rate part of it is all done. So I think it's just broadly her message. So I think everybody's going to be watching the same thing. Will she say anything that's notable? Probably not, because really on your first rodeo, on your first showing, are you really gonna shake up the markets? Probably not. But nonetheless, I think it's still a momentous event to watch.
All right, watching those diplomacy skills being put into action today. Thank you so much. Lali Topjali, the Senior Fund Manager at JOHCM, checking the data now. S&P futures close to 0.1% higher. Dow futures about 0.1% higher. Looking at NASDAQ futures now, 0.2% higher. Not much change, mostly flat. 10-year yield at 1.8, 2-year yield at 160. 30-year yield at 2.23. DAX in Germany gaining 0.1%. CAC in Paris up 0.1%. FTSE in London up 0.4%. Much more still to come on Bloomberg Daybreak. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Jobs get attention today with the weekly snapshot of unemployment claims. We also get a reading on consumer comfort in a Bloomberg report and earnings from Adobe, Broadcom, and Oracle. And we also hear from Costco. At JP Morgan Chase, the robots are watching employee expenses. The bank has started using machine learning technology to process expense reports and figure out if they comply with company policies. Almost every industry wrestles with policing expenses, but it presents a special challenge in finance, where employees spend much of the year on the road and meeting clients. U.S.-China trade remains in focus as investors await news on whether the world's two biggest economies can avert new U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports by Sunday. Stocks rose slightly yesterday with the broader U.S. equity market up 0.3%. The Fed left rates unchanged as expected and also signaled that interest rates won't change through next year. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/sees-change.
Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to work well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With Westin meetings, you work and feel your best with nutritious snacks and nourishing smoothies that give you the energy you need to power through any meeting. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use, and the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
Dear Dad, Merry Christmas. Thank you for always doing everything you could to make this time of year special for us. No one has a Christmas jumper collection quite like yours. Your festive spirit is...
Gingerbread latte with 2 shots and nutmeg whipped cream for Joe.
I hope it snows. I know how you love a white Christmas. All my love, Joe. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app and get 20% off when you buy a card and gift this Christmas. Use code Heartfelt20. Exclusions apply.
Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Amy Morris. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by Stevens Institute of Technology, ranked highest in the New York metro area for online graduate business programs by U.S. News and World Report. A Stevens graduate finance degree will position you for what's next. Stevens.edu/finance.
And we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are higher around the world after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell signaled interest rates will remain unchanged next year.
We believe that monetary policy is well positioned to serve the American people by supporting continued economic growth, a strong job market, and inflation near our symmetric 2% goal.
The decision to leave its rates unchanged came in the Fed's first unanimous vote since May. While the markets are not anticipating a rate cut next year, Grant Thornton chief economist Diane Swong thinks the Fed's not done.
The Fed actually has a much lower threshold to cut rates than raise rates, and I think we still will see an additional rate cut, at least one next year, if not more than that. And that's something that the Fed doesn't want to say up front, but I think Chairman Powell is more than ready to do, and he's been able to get the votes even when it was tight.
The next Fed decision comes January 29th.
Now it's the European Central Bank's turn. The ECB's first policy decision under President Christine Lagarde comes today, along with fresh projections. Bloomberg's Jana Randau has more from Frankfurt.
New economic forecasts will include a first glance at 2022, a first reading of inflation there, so that's probably the one number that we will look at most. The one thing that could be interesting is the policy review that everybody has been talking about.
Analysts expect no change to rates or asset purchases from the ECB.
Saudi Aramco has reached a milestone. Shares jumped by the daily limit again to push the oil giant's valuation beyond $2 trillion.
The International Energy Agency is predicting a global oil surplus next year, even if OPEC and its partners deliver newly announced production cuts in full. Checking oil right now, NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 34 cents at $59.10 a barrel. Brent is up 0.9% at $64.30.
Shares of Lululemon are down 4%, despite posting another quarter of double-digit sales growth. The company's profit forecast disappointed some investors.
Costco, Oracle, Broadcom, and Adobe all report earnings today. We're also watching for reports on producer prices and jobless claims. Futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 4 points. Dow futures up 20. NASDAQ futures up 12. The 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds. The yield 1.79%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's bring in John Tucker with more on what's going on in the world.
And Amy, the House Judiciary Committee has taken the first steps toward voting on articles of impeachment against President Trump. California Democrat Eric Swalwell at a hearing last night.
Donald Trump directed Rudy Giuliani to smear his political rival. Donald Trump fired an anti-corruption ambassador who stood in his way. Donald Trump withheld $391 million in aid that was essential to Ukraine.
Ohio Republican Jim Jordan says Americans should be scared by the impeachment.
It would be well to remember that what can be done to a president can be done to any of us. This is scary stuff and serious stuff, and I hope you guys will reconsider and stop it while you can.
Last night's back and forth was a prelude to this morning's session, with the Democratic majority in the panels expected to beat back a flurry of Republican amendments before sending the impeachment articles to the full House for a vote next week. Mexico's Senate Majority Leader pushing for passage of changes to a new free trade deal with the U.S. and Canada by the end of this week. This after the governments of the three nations completed months of negotiations that would make Mexico the first country to approve the revised trade deal. Israel's deadlocked parliament has failed to meet a midnight deadline to form a coalition government, and that triggers an unprecedented third election in a 12-month period. Joe Biden says he would reverse Donald Trump's immigration policies during his first 100 days in office while renewing a push for Congress to pass a comprehensive immigration overhaul. Biden issued his immigration plan months after most of his Democratic rivals, a sign of how tricky the issue is for the former vice president. And New Zealand military specialists will land on a small volcanic island just after first light to retrieve the bodies of 8 victims of an eruption that claimed 8 other lives and severely burned survivors. And for the first time since the early 1900s, more Americans are dying at home rather than in hospitals. Deaths in nursing homes have also declined, this according to a report in the New England Journal of Medicine. Doctors say the trend reflects the rise in home hospice care. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Amy.
All right, thank you, John. It is 5:35 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashower.
Amy, Knicks and Warriors, one of those somebody-had-to-win type games. Both teams came in with already 20 losses. Looked like it would be the Knicks easily. They led by 21 in the second quarter. Sure enough, D'Angelo Russell, a late three to send the game to overtime, but the Knicks pulled it out. 124-122. Marcus Morris scored 36, and the Knicks end a 10-game losing streak. It's the first win for their new coach, Mike Miller. The Nets blew a 20-point lead, lost at home to Charlotte 113-108 as Devontae Graham scored 40 for the Hornets. College hoops in New Jersey, Rutgers beat Wisconsin 72-65. Also St. Peter's over Fairleigh Dickinson 86-70. The United States has only lost the President's Cup golf once. That was over 20 years ago, but a terrible start in Melbourne as the U.S. lost 4 of the first 5 matches. The only victory coming from Tiger Woods and Justin Thomas. Tiger is the team captain. For the third time this this week, a baseball free agent signed a mega deal. Anthony Rendon just led Washington to winning the World Series and now heading to the Angels for 7 years, $245 million. Same package Steven Strasburg got to stay with the Nationals. Garrett Cole, of course, got even more from the Yankees. The Mets signed pitcher Michael Wacha from the Cardinals. Jets a big underdog tonight in Baltimore. The concern for Coach Adam Gase is Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson.
I'm going to say a guy that caused a lot of problems for the defense. They're doing a lot of really creative things. They're finding ways to really tie in the run game, pass game. Play action stuff's really good. I mean, they just get everybody out of position. Guys are running wide open. He's doing a good job hitting guys in stride, explosive plays all over the place. They're phenomenal in the run game as far as what they're doing.
Ravens have won 9 in a row. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Amy?
All right. Thank you, John. It is 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now. With a cover on the Bloomberg 50. That's the 50 people who defined global business in 2019. Joel Weber helped compile the list for Bloomberg Business Week, which also includes a chicken sandwich.
You know, this was the Popeyes chicken sandwich. A 3-month supply sell out in a matter of days. People even got stabbed over it, which was like, you know, the downside of this story. But really, it speaks to like the ability for brands to like harness things. And a chicken sandwich of all things, you know, with some extra pickles can really break the internet.
And you can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MHE Go. And listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street and time now for the Tri-State Business Report. For that, we are joined live by Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Morning, Amy. Well, it's been a pretty good year for Manhattan apartment landlords, and November was their best month yet. Units leased for a median of about $3,500 after concessions. That's just $19 short of the record high reached in July, according to appraiser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman Real Estate. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey will continue to discount bridge and tunnel tolls for motorists who carpool. Cars with at least 3 people were scheduled to lose the discount January 5th. Drivers paying as much as $16 instead of the usual $6.50. Well, the bond market has stopped penalizing Connecticut. The gap between its debt yields and the AAA benchmark has narrowed this year by more than any of the other 19 big states tracked by Bloomberg's indexes. That's your Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Amy?
All right, thank you, Ed. It is 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world. I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Jim Lentz, long-serving CEO of Toyota North America, will retire in April.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WTVN in Columbus, I'm reporting that robots now process employees' expense reports at J.P. Morgan Chase.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that Walgreens and McKesson have created a joint venture to combine their respective drug wholesale businesses in Germany.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Fiat Chrysler's UAW workers have ratified a collective bargaining agreement.
And some other stories we're watching. Fiat Chrysler's unionized U.S. workers have a new contract. The United Auto Workers says 71% of voting members approved the deal. It is the last of 3 agreements negotiated this year by the union. Nomura Holdings has agreed to buy American boutique investment bank GreenTech Capital Advisors. It is a rare overseas acquisition for Japan's biggest brokerage. GreenTech has helped Goldman Sachs and other firms buy and sell wind and solar farms. Terms of the deal were not announced. And Citigroup says gold has more room to rally, thanks to little possibility of the Fed raising interest rates next year. Stay with us. Much more coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
We just got back from a beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on Ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything. Or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
To LeBron, slam dunk.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss. The Miami Heat are taking their talents to Texas to take on the second-year phenom, Luka Doncic, and the Dallas Mavericks.
Pulls back, trying to make it 11-2.
This Saturday, the Miami Heat are at the Dallas Mavericks. Tip-off is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA on TuneIn to follow your favorite NBA team today.
24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The president is the smoking gun.
Democrat Pramila Jayapal, as the House Judiciary Committee met yesterday, panel member and Republican Greg Steube sees it differently.
Unlike Presidents Nixon and Clinton, who were impeached for actual crimes, President Trump is being impeached based on theories concocted by the Democrats.
A vote by the committee to send articles of impeachment to the full House for an impeachment vote is expected today. Officials say the deadly shooting at a Jewish market in Jersey City, New Jersey, was a targeted attack. Authorities describe how a man and woman deliberately pulled up to the place in a stolen rental van, got out firing, and killed 6 people. New Zealand officials say they'll begin to recover victims' bodies believed to remain on White Island after that volcanic explosion earlier this week. But continuing volcanic activity has delayed the retrieval of the 8 bodies believed to still be there. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the head count?
Right where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and stocks in Europe are now little changed. S&P futures little changed as well. Investors are digesting the Federal Reserve's signal that U.S. interest rates will remain unchanged through 2020 and preparing for the European Central Bank's policy decision. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures now up about 2.5 points. Dow futures up 7. NASDAQ futures up 10. The DAX in Germany up less than 1/10 of a percent. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds. Yield 1.79%. Yield on the 2-year 1.60%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 34 cents at $59.10 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $3.70 at $14.7870 an ounce. The euro at 1.1130 against the dollar. British pound 1.3196. They're both little changed against the dollar. The yen is at 108.65. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's John Tucker with more on what's going on around the world. John.
And Karen, this morning, the Democratic majority of the House Judiciary Committee expected to beat back Republican amendments before sending the impeachment articles to the full House for a vote next week. Israel's political dysfunction means a third election in less than a year. The fractured parliament there had until midnight to find somebody who could form a coalition government.